Hey story enthusiasts! This is the Potter Show bringing you another gem. In this video, we present to you, what if Goblin Curse Breakers found 29 illegal bindings on Harry and demanded ministry trial live? If you enjoy these stories as much as we enjoy sharing them, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Discovery. A bell chimed softly as Harry Potter pushed through the bronze doors of Gringotts' Wizarding Bank. The familiar marble hall stretched before him, its polished floors reflecting the light from crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. Despite having been here several times before, something about Gringotts always made Harry's stomach knot with tension. Perhaps it was the goblin tellers with their calculating stares, or maybe it was simply that money matters reminded him too much of his years of poverty at the Dursleys. 2 weeks had passed since the nightmare in the graveyard. 2 weeks since Cedric had died. 2 weeks of being locked away at Privet Drive with nothing but his thoughts and the occasional cryptic letter from his friends telling him precisely nothing useful. The dreams came nightly, Cedric's lifeless eyes, Voldemort rising from that cauldron, his parents' echoing voices. Harry approached the nearest available teller, a particularly sour-faced goblin counting rubies the size of eggs. "Excuse me," Harry said, forcing confidence into his voice. "I need to speak with someone about my account." The goblin barely glanced up. "Name?" "Harry Potter." This time the goblin looked up properly, eyes narrowing as they flicked to Harry's forehead. "Purpose of visit?" "I need to know what happens to my vault now that now that Voldemort's back." Harry lowered his voice on the last part, though several nearby witches and wizards still turned to stare. The goblin's long fingers stilled on the rubies. "Verification wand, please." Harry hesitated before passing over his holly and phoenix feather wand. The goblin placed it on a brass scale that immediately began to vibrate. A slip of parchment emerged from a slot in its base. "Wait here, Mr. Potter." The goblin vanished through a door behind the counter. 5 uncomfortable minutes passed before the goblin returned, accompanied by an older, more dignified goblin whose silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in an elaborate braid. "Mr. Potter," the elder goblin said, "I am Nagnok, senior curse breaker for Gringotts. Please follow me." That wasn't what Harry had expected. "I just had questions about my account, which we will address," Nagnok cut in smoothly. "But first, some routine security matters. This way, please." Harry followed Nagnok through an ornate door and down a torchlit corridor. Unlike the cart tunnels that led to the vaults, this passage was paneled in dark wood with silver inlays forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift when Harry wasn't looking directly at them. "Security's been tightened," Harry observed. Nagnok gave a curt nod. "Indeed. The return of he who must not be named has implications for financial security." They turned a corner and entered a circular room lined with rune-covered stone. A single desk sat at its center with 2 chairs on opposite sides. The floor featured a complex pattern that reminded Harry of the astronomy charts they studied at Hogwarts. "Please stand in the center circle," Nagnok instructed, gesturing to a ring of silver embedded in the stone floor. Harry stepped into position, suddenly wary. "What exactly is this?" "Standard identity verification and security screening. Nothing to concern yourself with if you are, indeed, Harry Potter." Nagnok's sharp teeth gleamed in what might have been a smile. "The magical disturbances of recent weeks have necessitated additional precautions." Harry nodded, reasoning that made sense after the impersonation of Moody Allyear. He stood in the circle, watching as Nagnok drew a silver tool resembling a conductor's baton from his coat. "Remain still," the goblin instructed, beginning to trace patterns in the air. The silver ring beneath Harry's feet began to glow, and he felt a gentle warmth spreading upward from the soles of his shoes. It wasn't unpleasant, rather like stepping into a hot bath, but something about it made the hair on his arms stand up. "That's odd," Nagnok muttered, frowning at whatever he was seeing. "What's wrong?" "Nothing to concern." Nagnok stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he slashed the baton through a more complex pattern. "Impossible." The warmth intensified suddenly, becoming uncomfortable heat that prickled along Harry's skin. A high-pitched whine filled the room, emanating from the glowing circle. "What's happening?" Harry asked, voice tight with concern. Instead of answering, Nagnok barked something in gobbledygook. The door burst open as two more goblins rushed in, one carrying what looked like a silver briefcase. "Step out of the circle, Mr. Potter." "Carefully," Nagnok instructed, his professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine alarm. Harry took a step forward, and the world tilted sideways. A spike of pain shot through his head, not from his scar, but everywhere at once, as if his skull were being crushed in a vice. His vision blurred, knees buckling beneath him. He was dimly aware of urgent voices shouting in gobbledygook, of small, strong hands catching him before he hit the floor. Then darkness washed over him like a tide. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came sound, urgent voices speaking rapidly in a language he didn't understand. Then sensation. He was lying on something cool and firm. Finally, sight returned as Harry forced his heavy eyelids open. He was in a different room now, larger and dominated by a raised stone platform on which he now lay. The ceiling above was domed and covered in more of those shifting silver patterns. Around him, at least 6 goblins moved with purpose, manipulating instruments, and consulting ancient-looking texts. "He's awake!" came Nagnok's voice. The goblin appeared at Harry's side, peering down at him with an expression Harry couldn't quite interpret. "How do you feel, Mr. Potter?" Harry tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. "Like I've been hit by the night bus." "What happened?" "That," said Nagnok, "is what we are attempting to determine." He made a gesture, and another goblin approached, holding what appeared to be a clear crystal suspended from a silver chain. "What I am about to tell you will be disturbing. I ask that you remain calm." That wasn't reassuring at all. Harry swallowed hard. "Just tell me." "Our security screening detected anomalies in your magical signature. Further investigation revealed that you are currently under the effect of multiple binding spells." Harry blinked. "Binding spells? Like someone's tracking me?" Nagnok's expression darkened. "No, Mr. Potter. Not tracking. Binding, constraining, restricting. Your magic has been deliberately limited and controlled through artificial means." "That's not possible," Harry said automatically. "I'd know if someone, you would not." Nagnok interrupted sharply. "Not if these bindings were placed early enough. And from our preliminary assessment, many appear to have been in place since you were an infant." Harry's mouth went dry. "How many are we talking about?" The goblins exchanged glances. "Thus far," Nagnok said carefully, "we have identified 29 distinct magical bindings." 29? Harry repeated, the number seeming absurd. "That can't be right." A female goblin stepped forward, her silver hair elaborately braided. "I am Grishtok, Master Archivist of Gringotts. I have personally verified the binding signatures. There can be no mistake." Harry struggled to process this. "But what does that mean? What kind of bindings?" Nagnok gestured, and the crystal suspended from the chain began to glow. As it was lowered over Harry's chest, multicolored threads of light appeared in the air above him, forming an intricate web. Each of these represents a different magical restriction. Grishtok explained, pointing to the threads. "The gold threads constrain your core magic, reducing your overall power. The red affect your emotions and behaviors. The blue relate to memory and cognition. The green influence physical development." Harry stared at the glowing web hovering above him. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like looking at a deadly spider's web. "Who would do this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "That," said Nagnok grimly, "is what we intend to discover. But first, we face a more immediate concern. These bindings are not merely unethical, they are actively dangerous. Your recent magical growth is straining against them. The fact that you collapsed during a simple security scan suggests they are beginning to fail catastrophically. What happens if they fail? Best case? Uncontrolled magical surges as your true power asserts itself. Worst case?" Nagnok paused. "Death." Harry let out a shaky breath. Brilliant. Just brilliant. So what do? We must remove them. Carefully, systematically. Starting with those posing the most immediate threat. Another goblin stepped forward, this one wearing elaborate silver armor over traditional robes. I am Ragnak, director of Gringotts' London branch. Before we proceed, you must understand the implications, Mr. Potter. The removal of these bindings constitutes the discovery of a grave magical crime against your person. Under the Treaty of 1612 and the ancient laws predating your ministry, we are obligated to invoke justice protocols. Harry frowned. What does that mean exactly? It means, Ragnak said, that once we begin removing these bindings, we will be required to demand a full public trial before the Wisengamot. These proceedings cannot be classified or conducted in private. The nature and extent of these violations must be made known. A public trial? Harry echoed. I don't want more attention, this is not optional. Ragnak cut in firmly. Not for us, and not for you. These bindings violate no fewer than 14 major magical laws and treaties. The perpetrators must be identified and held accountable. Harry closed his eyes briefly. More publicity, more chaos, exactly what he didn't want. But the alternative was apparently death by magical meltdown. Fine, he said finally. Do what you need to do. Remove them. Ragnak nodded gravely. We will begin with the most immediately dangerous binding, a suppressor on your core magic that appears to be fracturing already. The goblins moved into position around the stone platform. Grishtak began chanting in gobbledygook, while Ragnak carefully manipulated the glowing web with silver tools. Harry felt a strange tugging sensation deep in his chest, as if something was being gently untangled. Then the tugging became a tearing, and pain lanced through his body. Harry's back arched involuntarily as he gasped for breath. The room filled with blinding golden light emanating from his chest. For a terrible moment, he thought he might be dying. Then, abruptly, the pain vanished. In its place came a rush of something. Power, energy, magic. Harry had no words for the sensation. It was as if he'd spent his whole life breathing through a narrow straw and suddenly his lungs were fully opened. Merlin's beard, he whispered, staring at his hands. They looked the same, but they felt different. Everything felt different. The first binding is removed, Ragnak announced, looking slightly awed. That particular suppressor was restricting approximately 30% of your core magical capacity. 30%? Harry repeated. And you said there are more like it? 3 more core suppressors, yes. Together, they were restraining approximately 75% of your natural magical potential. Harry struggled to comprehend this. You're saying I've only been using a quarter of my magic all this time? Approximately, Grishtak confirmed. Though magical power is not so easily quantified. Before Harry could process this, a young goblin burst into the room, speaking rapidly to Ragnak in gobbledygook. The director's expression hardened. It appears, he told Harry, that word of our discovery has reached the ministry already. Officials are demanding your immediate release into their custody. How did they even know I was here? Harry asked. An excellent question, Ragnak replied darkly. One of many that will need answering. Director Ragnak will handle the ministry while we continue. The second binding must be removed quickly. It's a memory block that's destabilizing rapidly now that the core suppressor is gone. Harry nodded, bracing himself for more pain. This time, as Ragnak and Grishtak worked, the sensation was different. Less physical pain and more a strange pressure in his mind. The pressure built steadily until Harry felt something snap like a taut rubber band breaking. Images flooded his consciousness. A red-haired woman singing softly. Strong hands lifting him high in the air, a man's laugh. A black-haired man transforming into a large dog and back again. A gentle-faced man with scars creating tiny, dancing lights with his wand for baby Harry to chase. Memories. His earliest memories, previously locked away. Tears streamed down Harry's face as he remembered, truly remembered, his parents and their friends. Not just static images from photographs, but living, breathing people who had loved him. The second binding is removed, Nagnok announced, though his voice seemed to come from far away as Harry struggled with the emotional impact of these recovered memories. Why? Harry managed, wiping at his face. Why would someone take these memories from me? That, said a new voice from the doorway, is what we all want to know. Harry turned to see Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, standing in the entrance. Her square-jawed face was set in grim lines, her monocle flashing in the magical light still emanating from the web above Harry. Madam Bones, Ragnarok acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. You've arrived more quickly than expected, Director Ragnarok, she replied with equal formality. When Gringotts invokes the ancient right of magical arbitration for the first time in 3 centuries, the DMLE takes notice. Her eyes fixed on Harry. Are you all right, Mr. Potter? Harry wasn't sure how to answer that. I've been better, he managed. Madam Bones turned to Nagnok. Explain. The senior curse breaker straightened. Mr. Potter triggered our security wards, which detected multiple illegal magical bindings. Initial investigation revealed 29 distinct bindings of various types, many dating to infancy. We've removed 2 thus far, a core magic suppressor and a memory block. Both were dangerously unstable. Bones' eyebrows shot up. 29? That's unprecedented. Indeed, Ragnarok said coldly. Which is why Gringotts has invoked the ancient right. This matter cannot be handled through normal ministry channels. A flash of annoyance crossed Bones' face. The ministry is perfectly capable. With respect, Madam Bones, Ragnarok interrupted. The magical signatures we've detected thus far suggest involvement from individuals highly placed within your ministry. The ancient rite ensures an unbiased proceeding. Harry saw Bones' expression shift as she processed this. I see, she said finally. You've sent the formal notification to the Wisengamot? The summons have been dispatched, Ragnarok confirmed. The trial of magical justice will commence in 24 hours, as tradition demands. Bones nodded curtly. Then as head of the DMLE, I must place Mr. Potter under protective custody until… No, Ragnarok cut in firmly. Under the ancient rite, Mr. Potter remains under Goblin protection until the trial begins. This is non-negotiable. For a moment, Bones looked like she might argue, but then she sighed. Very well. But I insist on stationing Oris outside Gringotts. Acceptable, Ragnarok conceded. Now, if you'll excuse us, we must continue removing the most dangerous bindings. Bones hesitated. May I remain as an official witness? Ragnarok and Nagnok exchanged glances. You may, Ragnarok said finally. But you may not interfere. Bones nodded and moved to one side of the room as the goblins resumed their work. Harry, meanwhile, was still processing the recovered memories, trying to reconcile them with the narrative he'd been told about his early life. The third binding is a behavioral modifier, Nagnok explained as they prepared for the next removal. It appears designed to suppress self-preservation instincts and promote reckless behavior. Harry's eyes widened. You're joking. Goblins rarely joke about magical violations, Mr. Potter, Bridgetalk said gravely. This particular binding explains your notable tendency toward dangerous heroics. From her position by the wall, Madam Bones made a small noise that might have been surprise or outrage. This removal may cause a significant personality shift, Nagnok warned. Are you prepared? Was he? Harry wasn't sure. What would it mean to suddenly have different impulses and instincts? Would he even be the same person? Do it, he said, pushing aside his doubts. Better to be his true self, whatever that meant, than a magically engineered version. This time, the process felt like having a heavy blanket slowly pulled away from his mind. As the binding dissolved, Harry felt a strange clarity descending. Looking back on his life, he could suddenly see patterns, situations where he'd rushed headlong into danger without considering alternatives, times he'd risked his life unnecessarily. Bloody hell, he murmured. I really have been an idiot sometimes, haven't I? Nagnak's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. The binding encouraged impulsivity and recklessness while suppressing caution. Its removal doesn't change who you are fundamentally, but you may find yourself considering consequences more carefully now. I need to contact my friends, Harry said, the thought suddenly urgent. Hermione and Ron should know what's happening. A reasonable request, Ragnak said. We will arrange it after the next binding removal. This one is particularly concerning, a loyalty compulsion keyed to specific individuals. Harry felt sick. A loyalty compulsion? You mean someone magically forced me to trust certain people? Yes, Nagnak confirmed grimly. And conversely, to distrust others. Who? Harry demanded. We cannot determine specific targets until we dismantle the binding. Grishtak explained. The magical signature will reveal the caster, which may provide clues. Harry lay back, anger burning through him. Was nothing in his life truly his own? Not even his friendships and relationships? The removal of this binding was the most uncomfortable yet. Rather than pain or pressure, Harry experienced a series of emotional surges, affection, trust, and loyalty flooding him before draining away like water, leaving him feeling hollow and uncertain. Names and faces flashed through his mind: Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Hagrid, the Weasleys. As the process completed, Harry felt not different exactly. He still cared for these people, but the emotion felt more nuanced now, less absolute. He could see flaws and questionable actions that he'd previously overlooked or excused. The binding is removed, Nagnak announced. The magical signature is interesting. Whose was it? Harry asked. Nagnak hesitated. It appears to be a composite. The primary signature belongs to Albus Dumbledore, but there are traces of Molly Weasley as well. Harry felt as if he'd been punched. Dumbledore? Mrs. Weasley? They made me trust them? Magically? So it would appear, Nagnak confirmed. From her corner, Madame Bones looked deeply troubled. This is extremely serious, she said. Loyalty compulsions are classified as mind control, a Wizengamot-level crime. Harry struggled to process this betrayal. Dumbledore had always been his mentor, his protector. And Mrs. Weasley, she'd been the closest thing to a mother he'd known. Had it all been artificial? I still need to contact Ron and Hermione, he said finally. Whatever happens, they deserve to know. Ragnak nodded. Griphook will escort you to a private room where you may send messages. But first, you should know that news of your situation is already spreading. Our invocation of the ancient rite has triggered automatic notifications to all Wizengamot members and international magical authorities. Wonderful, Harry muttered. Just what he needed, more unwanted attention. One moment before you go, Nagnak said, handing Harry a small mirror. You should see. Harry took the mirror hesitantly, then nearly dropped it in shock. His reflection was different. His face seemed slightly more defined, his eyes even more vibrantly green. But the most startling change was his height. He appeared to have grown at least 2 inches in the short time since the bindings had been removed. Physical restriction bindings, Grishtak explained, noting his surprise. They limited your growth and physical development. As they weaken, your body is beginning to adjust to its natural state. How many more need to be removed today? Harry asked, still staring at his altered reflection. Just one more critical binding, Nagnak said. A magical perception filter that's interfering with your ability to sense and interpret magic. The rest can wait until the trial. The final binding removal for the day left Harry with a strange new awareness. The world seemed suddenly more vibrant, as if he'd been seeing in muted colors before, and now everything was in high definition. He could feel magic, actually feel it, pulsing around him like a living thing. The Goblin's magic, sharp and precise. The ancient magic of Gringotts itself, steady and immovable. Even his own magic, which now felt vast and barely contained within his skin. Afterward, Harry was escorted to a comfortable office where he was given parchment and quill to write to Ron and Hermione. He stared at the blank page, unsure where to even begin. How do you explain that your entire life has been a magically manipulated lie? Finally, he wrote, Ron and Hermione, I'm at Gringotts. Something incredible and terrible has happened. The goblins discovered I've been under 29 different magical bindings since I was a baby. They're removing them, and there's going to be a public trial tomorrow. I need you both here. Please come as soon as you can. I'll explain everything then. Trust no one. Not your parents, Ron. Not the professors, Hermione. Just come. Harry P.S. I'm serious about trusting no one. One of the bindings was a loyalty compulsion from Dumbledore and your mum, Ron. He handed the letters to Griphook, who assured him they would be delivered immediately by the bank's most secure methods. Then Harry sank back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Only 5 bindings removed, and already his world had been turned upside down. What would happen when all 29 were gone? Who would he be then? And more importantly, who was responsible, and why had they done this to him? Hermione Granger was organizing her Hogwarts trunk for the 5th time that summer when a strange tapping came at her bedroom window. It wasn't Hedwig's familiar knock, but something sharper and more insistent. She opened the window to find a sleek, black raven with a Gringotts seal around its neck, clutching a letter bearing Harry's unmistakable scrawl. Her heart raced as she read his message, brown eyes widening with each line. Mom! Dad! She called, already pulling out her wand and a small bag she charmed with an undetectable extension spell last term. I need to go to London. Now! At the Burrow, Ron Weasley was degnoming the garden when a Gringotts eagle owl swooped down, nearly taking his ear off in its haste to deliver its message. As he read Harry's letter, the color drained from his freckled face. His eyes lingered on the postscript, reading it over and over in disbelief. Bloody hell! He whispered. He glanced toward the house, where his mother was humming as she prepared dinner. For the first time in his life, Ron felt a flicker of suspicion toward her. He pocketed the letter and quietly slipped into the shed where his father kept Muggle contraptions. The flip powder was stored there for emergencies. This, Ron decided, definitely qualified. By nightfall, Gringotts Bank had transformed into the epicenter of a growing political storm. Ministry officials gathered at the entrance, prevented from entering by ancient wards and a contingent of goblin guards. Reporters from the Daily Prophet and other magical publications circled like vultures, desperate for information. Inside, Harry sat in a comfortable chamber deep within the bank, where Nagnok had explained he would be spending the night for his own protection. The room was luxurious by goblin standards, which meant it was carved from stone but furnished with velvet cushions and illuminated by enchanted crystals that glowed with a warm light. He wasn't alone. Hermione and Ron had arrived within hours of receiving his messages, both shocked and determined to help. Hermione had brought a stack of books on magical law and binding theory, while Ron, to Harry's surprise, had arrived with a wizard's chess set and a grim expression. It makes sense now, Hermione said, looking up from a massive tome titled Magical Bindings, Theory and Ethics. All those times you rushed into danger, Harry. The troll in first year, the basilisk, going after Sirius when we thought he was a murderer, the tournament. They weren't just bad decisions. You were literally compelled to act recklessly. Thanks, Harry said dryly. You know what I mean. Hermione replied, flushing slightly. It wasn't your fault. Ron moved a chess piece without looking at the board. What I don't understand is why. Why bind your magic and memories? Why make you reckless? What's the point? It was the question that had been haunting Harry all day. Control, he said finally. Someone wanted to control who I became. How powerful I was. Who I trusted. But who would do that to a baby? Hermione asked, horrified. And why? Ron's blue eyes were uncharacteristically serious. Think about it. Harry's not just anyone, is he? He's the boy who lived. The only person who ever survived the killing curse. The one who defeated you-know-who? So someone wanted to control the narrative. Hermione realized. Create their version of a hero. Or a weapon, Ron added quietly. A weapon they could point in the right direction when needed. Harry stared at his friend, surprised by this insight. That's exactly what it feels like, now that you say it. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Nagnak entered, accompanied by Grishtak and, to Harry's surprise, Madam Bones. Mr. Potter, Madam Bones said formally. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I've been conferring with the Goblin authorities about tomorrow's proceedings. Harry gestured for them to enter. It's fine. These are my friends, Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley. Bones finished with a nod. Yes, I'm aware. In fact, their presence is relevant to what I need to discuss with you. The three teenagers exchanged glances as the adults settled themselves. The trial of magical justice will begin at noon tomorrow, Nagnak explained. It will be conducted in the ancient hall beneath Gringotts, with attendance restricted to the Wizengamot, key witnesses, and a limited press contingent. The entire Wizengamot has been summoned, Madam Bones added, as have representatives from the International Confederation of Wizards. This case has significant implications. What exactly happens during this trial? Hermione asked. Grishtak answered. Each binding will be presented as evidence, its nature and purpose explained, and then publicly removed. The magical signatures will be recorded and matched to potential casters. Witnesses may be called to explain their involvement. And my friends? Harry asked. Can they attend? As direct associates affected by several of the bindings, their presence is actually required, Nagnak said. Preliminary examination suggests that some of the loyalty and emotional bindings directly reference both Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley. Ron paled. What does that mean exactly? It means, Madam Bones said carefully, that your friendship with Mr. Potter may have been influenced by these bindings. Hermione looked horrified. That's awful. You can't seriously think, we don't know anything for certain yet. Nagnak interrupted. The trial will reveal the truth. Harry felt suddenly exhausted. Even his friendships, the most important relationships in his life, might be tainted by magical manipulation. Was anything real? There's another matter. Madam Bones continued after a moment. The Ministry, specifically Minister Fudge, has attempted to classify these proceedings and move them to a private hearing. Can he do that? Harry asked sharply. No, Ragnak said, entering the room behind them. The ancient right supersedes ministerial authority. However, you should be prepared for significant political pressure. Many powerful individuals will not want these revelations made public. Dumbledore? Harry asked, the name tasting bitter now. The headmaster arrived at the ministry an hour ago, Madam Bones confirmed. He has requested a private meeting with you before the trial. No, Harry said immediately. Not until I know exactly what he did to me. Bones nodded. I suspected that would be your answer. I've informed him accordingly. There's one last thing you should know, Nagnak said, his expression grave. The removal of the remaining bindings tomorrow will likely cause significant magical destabilization. Your core magic has been constrained for so long that its sudden freedom may result in unpredictable effects. What kind of effects? Hermione asked, concern evident in her voice. Uncontrolled magical surges. Possible physical transformations as suppressed traits emerge. Emotional volatility as psychological bindings dissolve. Nagnak listed these consequences as if reading a weather report. We will take precautions, but you should be prepared. Brilliant, Harry muttered. Public magical meltdown. Just what I always wanted. Ron snorted, breaking the tension slightly. Look at it this way, mate. At least you'll finally get some height. Despite everything, Harry found himself laughing. It felt good, real, in a way few things had today. After the adults left, the three friends talked late into the night, theorizing about who might have placed the bindings and why. Hermione compiled lists of possible culprits and motives, while Ron, surprising both of them, offered insights into the political ramifications that neither Harry nor Hermione had considered. Dad always says to look for who benefits. Ron explained. If someone bound your magic and memories, they got something out of it. Power, control, maybe even money. Money? Harry repeated. How would binding me get someone money? Ron shrugged. You're rich, aren't you? And you were an orphan. Perfect target for financial manipulation. Hermione stared at Ron. That's actually quite brilliant. Ron's ears reddened. Don't sound so surprised. As the night grew late, Harry found himself standing by the small window in their chamber, looking out at the stars visible over Diagon Alley. Tomorrow, everything would change. The wizarding world would learn that their hero had been magically manipulated his entire life. The architects of that manipulation would be exposed. And Harry himself would finally discover who he truly was, without bindings and restrictions shaping him. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. A soft glow caught his attention. Looking down, Harry realized his hands were emitting a faint golden light, his magic leaking through his skin as the bindings continued to weaken. Harry? Hermione called, noticing the glow. Are you all right? I don't know, he answered honestly. But I think I will be. Harry woke before dawn, consciousness returning in a rush that left him momentarily disoriented. The stone ceiling above him wasn't Gringotts, Hogwarts, or Privet Drive. For a panicked moment, he couldn't place where he was. Then it all came flooding back, the bindings, the goblin curse breakers, the impending trial. Harry sat up, noticing that the strange golden glow had spread overnight. His entire body now emitted a faint luminescence, as if his magic were trying to escape through his pores. Ron snored softly from a nearby bed, while Hermione had fallen asleep surrounded by open books, her bushy hair spread across a particularly ancient tome. Harry watched them for a moment, wondering if their friendship had been manipulated or if it was one of the few genuine things in his life. A soft knock at the door preceded Nagnak's entrance. The goblin carried a bundle of clothing and a vial of purple liquid. Mr. Potter, he greeted quietly. I trust you slept well? Well enough, Harry replied, keeping his voice low to avoid waking his friends. What's that? Traditional robes for a subject of justice, Nagnak explained, setting down the bundle. And a stabilizing potion to help control your magic during the trial. The bindings are continuing to deteriorate. We can see the evidence quite clearly. Harry glanced down at his glowing skin. Yeah, a bit obvious, isn't it? Will this stop it? Temporarily. The potion will maintain equilibrium for approximately 6 hours, enough to get through the main proceedings. Harry took the vial, examining the swirling purple liquid within. Any side effects I should know about? Nagnak's lips twitched. You're becoming more cautious already. Good. The potion may cause slight dizziness and heightened sensory perception, but nothing serious. Harry nodded and downed the potion in one gulp. It tasted surprisingly pleasant, like blackberries and mint, and he felt its effects immediately. The golden glow receded, and with it the buzzing energy that had been building under his skin. Better, he sighed. The trial begins in 3 hours, Nagnak informed him. Your friends should prepare themselves as well. The proceedings will be intense. Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione. They can handle it. They've stood by me through worse. Let us hope that remains true, Nagnak said cryptically. There are still many revelations to come. After the goblin departed, Harry gently woke his friends. As they prepared for the day ahead, an undercurrent of tension ran beneath their casual conversation. None of them knew exactly what to expect, but all three understood that after today, nothing would be the same. The traditional robes felt strange against Harry's skin, heavier than his Hogwarts uniform and intricately embroidered with silver runes he didn't recognize. According to Hermione, who had naturally read about such things, they were protective symbols meant to shield him during the binding removals. It says here that the subject of justice is considered magically vulnerable, she explained, pointing to a passage in one of her books. The robes create a buffer against magical backlash. Comforting, Harry muttered. At 11:30, Griphook arrived to escort them to the ancient hall. They followed him through a labyrinth of corridors, descending deeper beneath Gringotts than Harry had ever been. The air grew cooler, and the walls changed from finished marble to raw stone embedded with veins of what looked like silver and gold. Finally, they emerged into a vast circular chamber that took Harry's breath away. The ancient hall was carved directly from bedrock, its domed ceiling at least 50 feet high and inlaid with constellations and precious metals and gems. The floor featured an intricate pattern of interlocking circles and runes, all centering on a raised dais of black stone. Tiered seating surrounded this central area, already filling with witches and wizards in formal robes. Harry recognized many Wizengamot members from his disciplinary hearing the previous year. Reporters clustered in a designated section, Rita Skeeter among them, her acid green quill already poised. "Mr. Potter," Madam Bones greeted them at the entrance. "Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley. You'll be seated here, in the witnesses' circle." She indicated a small section of seating near the central dais. As they took their places, Harry couldn't help but notice the whispers and stares directed his way. News had clearly spread, though how accurately was anyone's guess. His eyes scanned the crowd, automatically searching for familiar faces. Professor McGonagall sat rigidly in one row, her expression unreadable. Remus Lupin was present, looking even more worn than usual. And there, Harry's stomach clenched, was Dumbledore, resplendent in midnight blue robes spangled with stars. Their eyes met across the chamber. Dumbledore's expression was solemn, perhaps even sad, but Harry could detect no guilt or shame there. Just that same benevolent calm he'd always shown, as if he were merely a concerned observer rather than potentially one of the architects of Harry's magical imprisonment. Harry looked away first, anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. At precisely noon, a deep gong reverberated through the chamber, silencing all conversation. Ragnarok stepped onto the dais, flanked by Nagnok and a panel of 7 elderly goblins Harry hadn't seen before. "We gather under the ancient right of magical justice," Ragnarok announced, his voice magically amplified to fill the hall. "Invoked when grave magical crimes are discovered that transcend normal judicial boundaries. I, Ragnarok, Director of Gringotts, London, stand as arbiter." The formality of it all reminded Harry uncomfortably of his trial the previous summer, though the atmosphere here was different, less bureaucratic, more ceremonial. "The subject of justice is Harry James Potter," Ragnarok continued, "upon whom 29 illegal magical bindings were discovered during routine security screening." A murmur swept through the crowd at this announcement. "These bindings constitute violations of the Treaty of 1612, the International Statute for the Protection of Magical Children, and 14 other magical laws and treaties." Ragnarok gestured, and Nagnok stepped forward. "As senior curse breaker, I will present the evidence of each binding, its purpose, effects, and where possible, its magical signature identifying the caster." The chamber fell silent as Nagnok raised his hands. Above the central dais, an image appeared, a glowing representation of the web of bindings Harry had seen the day before. Gasps echoed through the hall as the extent of the magical interference became visible to all. "The first binding," Nagnok announced, highlighting a thick golden thread in the web, "is a core magic suppressor, placed when the subject was approximately 15 months old. This binding restricted approximately 30% of Mr. Potter's natural magical capacity. The golden thread expanded in the projection, revealing intricate patterns within its structure. The magical signature," Nagnok continued, "belongs to Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore." A collective intake of breath swept through the chamber. All eyes turned to Dumbledore, who sat impassively, hands folded in his lap. "This binding," Nagnok explained, "was designed to activate gradually as Mr. Potter aged, increasingly limiting his magical development. Had it remained in place into adulthood, it would have eventually suppressed nearly half his potential power." "Objection," called a voice from the Wizengamot section. It was Percy Weasley, looking officious in ministry robes. "This proceeding has no legal standing under current ministry law. I move that we, denied." Ragnarok cut in sharply. The ancient rite predates your ministry by centuries and was specifically preserved in the Treaty of 1612. Your objection is noted and dismissed. Percy flushed but fell silent. Ron, Harry noticed, was pointedly not looking at his brother. The second binding, Nagnok continued, highlighting a blue thread, is a memory block, also placed at approximately 15 months. This binding concealed Mr. Potter's earliest memories, specifically those of his parents and their close associates. Again, the magical signature was revealed to be Dumbledore's. Harry watched the headmaster carefully, but Dumbledore's expression remained unchanged. The third binding is a behavioral modifier designed to suppress self-preservation instincts and encourage reckless behavior, particularly in defense of others. This time, the magical signature was composite, primarily Dumbledore's, but with traces of another wizard Harry didn't recognize. The fourth binding is a loyalty compulsion key to specific individuals, including Albus Dumbledore, Molly Weasley, and the concept of Gryffindor House as an institution. At this, Ron flinched visibly. His mother wasn't present, Harry had checked, but the implication that she had magically manipulated his friendships clearly hit Ron hard. The fifth binding, removed yesterday for Mr. Potter's safety, was a magical perception filter, limiting his ability to sense and interpret magical energies. On and on it went, each binding more disturbing than the last. Some were relatively minor, enchantments to make Harry uncomfortable with certain topics like politics or finance. Others were profound, a binding that suppressed natural occlumency abilities, another that created an artificial magical connection to Privet Drive. Through it all, Harry sat rigid in his seat, the stabilizing potion barely containing his mounting anger. Each revelation felt like another violation, another theft of his autonomy. When Nagnok reached the 10th binding, he paused. What follows is particularly troubling. This binding is a blood magic leech, connecting Mr. Potter's magical core to another individual, allowing for a continuous, subtle drain on his magic. Murmurs of outrage swept through the chamber. Blood magic was heavily restricted, and using it to siphon magic from another wizard was considered among the darkest arts. The recipient of this magical energy, Nagnok announced gravely, was Albus Dumbledore. At this, even Dumbledore's composure slipped. He rose to his feet. I must object to this characterization, he said, his voice calm despite the serious accusation. The connection was established for protective purposes, to monitor Harry's well-being and location. Regardless of intent, Ragnarok countered coldly. The unauthorized use of blood magic on a magical child for any purpose is prohibited under Section 7 of the International Statute. The circumstances were exceptional. Dumbledore insisted. Lord Voldemort had just been defeated, his followers were at large, and Harry needed protection. And did this protection require suppressing 75% of his magic? Nagnok demanded. Did it require making him reckless and impulsive? Did it require stealing his earliest memories of his parents? Dumbledore had no immediate answer. After a moment of tense silence, he sat down again. Harry found himself gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The stabilizing potion was failing. He could feel his magic pushing against his skin, responding to his emotions. Harry, Hermione whispered, placing a hand on his arm. Breathe. Just breathe. He tried, focusing on pulling air into his lungs and releasing it slowly. It helped marginally. The proceedings continued with the 11th binding, an emotional suppressor designed to limit Harry's grief response. The 12th was a physical growth restrictor. The 13th artificially enhanced his connection to his scar. This binding, Nagnok explained, was designed to amplify the magical connection between Mr. Potter and the cursed scar on his forehead, essentially creating a permanent, open channel. For what purpose? Madame Bones asked from her position in the adjudicators section. That, Nagnok said grimly, is unclear. The binding structure suggests it was meant to facilitate some form of mental or magical connection. Its signature belongs primarily to Albus Dumbledore, with contributions from an unspeakable whose identity is magically obscured. An unspeakable, a member of the Department of Mysteries. Harry's mind raced. What possible reason could Dumbledore have for wanting to enhance his connection to Voldemort? By the time they reached the 20th binding, the mood in the chamber had shifted from shock to outrage. Even those Harry knew to be Dumbledore's supporters were looking disturbed by the mounting evidence. The 21st binding proved to be the breaking point for Harry's control. This binding, Nagnock announced, is a familial connection obscura, designed to prevent Mr. Potter from magically recognizing blood relations. Blood relations? Harry blurted out, unable to contain himself. What blood relations? Everyone always told me the Dursleys were my only living relatives. Nagnock turned to him. This binding specifically blocks recognition of magical signatures sharing partial DNA markers with your own. It prevents you from recognizing distant cousins or relatives through magical means. Are you saying I have other relatives? Harry demanded, rising to his feet. Magical relatives? The binding suggests so. Nagnock confirmed. Though we cannot determine who specifically without comprehensive genetic magical testing. Harry's control snapped. The stabilizing potion failed entirely as his magic surged outward in a visible wave of golden energy. The stone beneath his feet cracked, and the air around him shimmered with heat. You knew? He shouted, eyes fixed on Dumbledore. You knew I had other family, and you sent me to the Dursleys anyway? You left me with people who hated magic, who hated me, when I had magical relatives somewhere? Dumbledore stood, his expression grave. Harry, you must understand, and oh. Harry's voice reverberated through the chamber with magical force. I don't have to understand anything. You bound my magic, you stole my memories, you made me reckless enough to nearly get myself killed every year. And now I find out you kept me from family who might have actually wanted me? The golden glow around Harry intensified, and objects around the chamber, quills, parchments, even small items of jewelry, began to levitate as his magic affected the environment. Mr. Potter, Nagnock said firmly, your anger is justified, but uncontrolled magic in this chamber is dangerous. You must regain composure. Harry tried to rein in his emotions, but years of suppressed anger had found an outlet. The more he tried to control it, the more his magic resisted. Then Hermione was beside him, her hand finding his. Harry, she said softly, we're here. We're with you. But you need to breathe. On his other side, Ron stood up. She's right, mate. Let's get through this properly. Make them face what they did legally. Something about his friend's presence helped. Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the feeling of Hermione's hand in his, the solid presence of Ron beside him. Gradually, the golden glow receded, and the floating object settled back into place. Sorry, he muttered, embarrassed by the outburst. No apology necessary, Mr. Potter, Nagnock said. Such reactions are expected when bindings are removed rapidly. This is why we typically recommend a gradual process over months or years. Let's continue, Harry said, sitting down again. I want all of them gone. Today. Nagnock nodded and resumed his presentation. The remaining bindings included more memory blocks, behavioral modifiers, and magical suppressors. Most bore Dumbledore's signature, though others appeared as well. Madame Pomfrey had apparently placed medical bindings at Dumbledore's direction after various injuries. Professor McGonagall's signature appeared on an academic limiter designed to prevent Harry from excelling beyond a certain level in Transfiguration. By the time all 29 bindings had been identified and explained, nearly 4 hours had passed. The chamber was now silent, the initial shock having given way to a sort of horrified fascination. We will now proceed with the removal of the remaining bindings, Nagnock announced. This process is potentially dangerous and may result in significant magical discharge. Those with healing expertise should prepare to assist if necessary. Harry was escorted to the central dais, where he sat cross-legged within a circle of runes. Nagnock and 4 other goblin curse breakers positioned themselves around him. We will remove them in reverse order of placement, Nagnock explained. The most recent first, proceeding to the oldest and most deeply embedded. You will likely experience physical and magical reactions to each removal. Harry nodded, steeling himself. I'm ready. The process began. As each binding was carefully dismantled, Harry felt changes rippling through him. Some were subtle, shifts in perception or thought patterns. Others were dramatic, surges of magic that manifested as visible light or physical transformations. After the removal of a binding that had limited his natural affinity for defensive magic, Harry's entire body glowed silver for nearly a minute. When they removed one suppressing his connection to his Potter heritage, his features shifted slightly, his jaw becoming more defined, his cheekbones higher, making him look suddenly more like the pictures he'd seen of his father. The most dramatic reaction came when they removed a binding connected to his Parseltongue ability. Instead of suppressing the ability entirely, which Dumbledore had apparently found impossible, the binding had added negative emotional associations and limited control. As it dissolved, Harry felt his understanding of the ability transform. What had once seemed like a dark, unsettling talent now felt like simply another magical language, neutral in itself, either good nor evil. To demonstrate this change, he found himself speaking Parseltongue deliberately, the sibilant sounds flowing easily from his tongue. Several spectators recoiled, but Harry felt no shame, only a sense of reclaiming something that had been twisted against him. The final binding, Nagnock announced, is the oldest and most powerful. Placed when Mr. Potter was approximately 15 months old, it suppresses approximately 45% of his core magical capacity and contains a complex behavioral framework designed to shape his overall personality development. Harry braced himself. If this was the binding that had done the most to shape him, its removal might fundamentally change who he was. Would he even recognize himself afterward? The goblins began the complex process of unraveling the binding. This one fought back, the golden thread in the magical projection writhing like a living thing as they worked to dismantle it. Harry felt pressure building inside him, as if his body could barely contain the power struggling to break free. Pain lanced through him suddenly, white-hot and all-consuming. He might have screamed, he wasn't sure. The world dissolved into light and sensation, his magic roaring through him like a tidal wave breaking through a dam. Somewhere, distantly, he heard voices shouting. Felt hands trying to stabilize him. But he was beyond their reach now, caught in the maelstrom of his own unleashed power. And then, abruptly, clarity. The pain vanished, replaced by a sense of wholeness Harry had never experienced before. He opened his eyes to find himself floating several feet above the dais, surrounded by a nimbus of golden light so bright it hurt to look at directly. Slowly, gently, he settled back to the ground, the light dimming to a manageable glow. The chamber was silent, every person present staring at him in amazement or fear. Harry stood, feeling stronger and more centered than he ever had in his life. His magic hummed contentedly beneath his skin, no longer fighting to escape but perfectly balanced and accessible. The bindings are removed, Nagnock announced, his voice slightly awed. Harry Potter stands before you, unbound for the first time since infancy. Harry looked out at the assembled witches and wizards, his gaze finally settling on Dumbledore. The old wizard looked suddenly just that, old. The customary twinkle in his blue eyes was gone, replaced by what might have been regret. Why? Harry asked, his voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. Why did you do this to me? Dumbledore rose slowly to his feet. I believed it was necessary, he said simply. Your power, even as an infant, was extraordinary. The prophecy that named me as Voldemort's equal, Harry interrupted. So you made sure I wouldn't be his equal. You made sure I'd be weaker. I sought to protect you, Dumbledore insisted. And to protect others from the potential consequences of uncontrolled power. You must understand, Harry, magic such as yours, left unfettered during formative years, can be unpredictable. Dangerous. So you decided I couldn't be trusted with my own magic, Harry said flatly. With my own memories. With my own personality. It was never so simple. It was exactly that simple. Harry cut in. You decided that your judgment should override my right to be myself. You shaped me into your weapon, your sacrifice, while pretending to care about me as a person. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Around the chamber, people shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the confrontation between the wizarding world's greatest hero and its most respected leader. I did care for you, Harry, Dumbledore said quietly. I still do. Everything I did, however misguided you may now find it, was done out of concern for your well-being and the greater good. The greater good, Harry repeated. Funny how the greater good always seems to require someone else's sacrifice, never yours. He turned away from Dumbledore, addressing Ragnak instead. Is the trial concluded? Have all the violations been documented? The Goblin director nodded. The evidence has been recorded and will be preserved in the Hall of Records. The Wizengamot must now vote on consequences for those implicated. Harry looked around at the members of the Wizengamot, many of whom seemed torn between their loyalty to Dumbledore and the undeniable evidence of wrongdoing. Before you vote, he said, I want to say something. Ragnak gestured for him to continue. Harry took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. The new clarity he felt made it easier to articulate what he needed to say. Today, you've seen evidence of a systematic magical violation that began when I was just a baby. You've seen how people I trusted shaped me, controlled me, limited me, all without my knowledge or consent. You might be tempted to dismiss this as exceptional circumstances. After all, I'm Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Special rules might seem justified. He paused, making eye contact with several Wizengamot members. But ask yourselves this. If it could happen to me, with all the attention and scrutiny on my life, what might be happening to other magical children? How many others have had their potential limited, their personalities shaped, their memories altered, all for someone else's vision of the greater good? Murmurs spread through the chamber as people considered this uncomfortable question. I don't want vengeance, Harry continued. What I want is change. I want laws that protect magical children from this kind of manipulation. I want accountability systems that prevent powerful figures from playing God with other people's lives. I want a wizarding world where magic is respected as a birthright, not a privilege to be granted or withdrawn based on someone else's judgment. He turned, facing Dumbledore directly once more. And I want the truth. All of it. No more half-answers, no more manipulations, no more when you're ready. I think we've established today that you're not qualified to decide when I'm ready for anything. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly, accepting the rebuke. Ragnak stepped forward. The Wizengamot will now deliberate on appropriate consequences. As this proceeding was initiated under the ancient rite, their decision must adhere to the principles of magical justice, focusing on restoration and prevention rather than merely punishment. As the Wizengamot members began their deliberation, Harry returned to where Ron and Hermione waited. Both looked at him with a mixture of awe and concern. How do you feel? Hermione asked tentatively. Harry considered the question. Different, he said finally. But more myself, somehow. Like I'd been wearing clothes that were too tight my whole life, and suddenly they fit properly. Ron studied him. You look different too. Taller, definitely. And your eyes are practically glowing. Side effects of the binding removals. Hermione explained. Your body and magic are adjusting to their natural state. Harry nodded, then noticed something strange. The conversation around them seemed muffled, as if heard through water, while other sounds from across the chamber were perfectly clear. His vision, too, had sharpened to an almost uncomfortable degree. He could see individual threads in Hermione's robes from several feet away. I think my senses are changing, he murmured. Everything's so intense. Enhanced magical perception, came Nagnak's voice as the goblin approached. A common effect when perception filters are removed. It will stabilize within a few days. The Wizengamot's deliberation was surprisingly brief. Within 30 minutes, Madame Bones rose to announce their decision. In the matter of the magical bindings placed upon Harry James Potter, she began formally. The Wiesengemot finds that violations of magical law have indeed occurred. The following consequences have been determined. The chamber fell silent as she continued. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore is removed from his position as Chief Warlock of the Wiesengemot, and placed on probation as headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He is further required to provide full disclosure of all information pertaining to Harry Potter, including prophecies, plans, and magical interventions, under Veritaserum if Mr. Potter so requests. Dumbledore accepted this with a slight nod, his expression unreadable. All individuals whose magical signatures appear on the illegal bindings will be subject to investigation by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, with penalties to be determined based on their level of knowledge and involvement. This would include, Harry realized, people like Madame Pomfrey and Professor McGonagall, who might have been following Dumbledore's instructions without fully understanding the implications. The Department of Mysteries is hereby directed to review all research and experiments involving magical children, with oversight from an independent committee including representatives from the Goblin Nation. That was unexpected, but welcome. Harry had a suspicion that his case wasn't the only instance of experimental magic being performed on children. Finally, in recognition of the unique circumstances and Mr. Potter's expressed wishes, the Wiesengemot will establish a commission to draft new laws protecting the magical autonomy of underage witches and wizards, with particular attention to orphans and muggle-raised magical children. Madame Bones looked directly at Harry. Mr. Potter will be invited to participate in this commission should he wish to do so. It wasn't perfect justice, nothing could truly compensate for what had been done to him, but it was a start. Harry felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he had stood up for himself not as the boy who lived, not as Dumbledore's protégé, but simply as Harry Potter, demanding the right to be himself. As the formal proceedings concluded, people began to file out of the chamber. Many cast curious or apprehensive glances at Harry, clearly wondering what this newly unbound version of their savior might do next. Dumbledore approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "Harry," he said quietly, "I know you have no reason to trust me now, but I hope that in time, you might allow me to explain fully. There is much you still don't know." Harry regarded him coolly. "You're right about one thing, I have no reason to trust you. But I will listen to that explanation, under Veritaserum as the Wiesengemot suggested. No more secrets, no more manipulations." Dumbledore inclined his head. "As you wish. When you are ready." As the old wizard walked away, Harry felt neither triumph nor vindication, only a quiet determination. This wasn't the end of his story, in many ways, it was just the beginning. With his magic finally unbound, his mind clear of artificial limitations, Harry Potter faced the future not as the weapon Dumbledore had tried to forge, but as himself, whoever that might turn out to be. Chapter 2: The Revelation. The morning after the trial began, Harry woke in unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, panic gripped him, another strange place, another day of uncertainty. Then he remembered, he was in a private suite at the Leaky Cauldron, secured by a team of goblins and 2 aurors handpicked by Madame Bones. Harry sat up slowly, taking inventory of himself. The physical changes were obvious even without a mirror. His pajamas now fit differently, his limbs longer, his chest broader. Running a hand through his hair, he found it thicker, with a different texture. Even his vision seemed sharper, though he still needed his glasses for perfect clarity. But the internal changes were far more profound. His magic hummed beneath his skin, responsive and eager where it had once been sluggish and difficult to control. His thoughts seemed to flow more clearly, connections forming easily between ideas. And his memories, fragments of his past that had been locked away, were now accessible, though many remained jumbled and confusing. A soft knock interrupted his musings. "Harry? Are you awake?" Hermione called through the door. "Come in," he replied, reaching for his dressing gown. Hermione entered, followed by Ron. Both stopped short at the sight of him. "Blimey," Ron muttered. "You look even more different in daylight." "Is it bad?" Harry asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Not bad," Hermione said quickly. Just different. You look more like the photos of your father now, but also, uniquely yourself. Harry nodded, not entirely sure what to make of that. Any news? The prophet's gone mental, Ron said, tossing a newspaper onto the bed. 5 special editions since yesterday. Dad says the ministry's in case. Emergency Gringotts sessions all night, international representatives demanding explanations. Harry glanced at the headline. Boy WHO lived magically imprisoned, Dumbledore implicated in shocking abuse. Below was a moving photograph of Harry from the trial, golden light emanating from him as the final binding was removed. Charming, he muttered, pushing the paper aside. There's more, Hermione said, her expression troubled. Magical law specialists are saying your case could set precedents for how magical children are treated. Some are calling for investigations into other orphan situations. Good, Harry said firmly. No one should go through what I did. Hermione hesitated. There's also talk about your magical status. The level of power you displayed yesterday. People are using terms like mage class and potential warlock tier. What does that even mean? Harry asked, frustrated by more wizard terminology he'd never been taught. Classification systems for magical strength, Ron explained, surprising both Harry and Hermione with his knowledge. Most witches and wizards are standard class. Dumbledore and you-know-who are considered warlock tier. Mage class is somewhere in between, like McGonagall or Moody. How do you know that? Hermione asked. Ron shrugged. Grew up in a wizard family, didn't I? You hear things. A more insistent knock came at the outer door to the suite. Ron answered it, returning with Nagnock and a goblin Harry hadn't met before. Mr. Potter, Nagnock greeted him. I trust you rested well? This is Silvermark, our magical historian. He'll be testifying today about historical precedents for binding cases. Harry nodded a greeting. What can I expect today? The trial resume's at 10, Nagnock explained. Yesterday established the existence and basic nature of the bindings. Today we'll focus on specific effects, casters' intentions, and the historical context. Will I need to do anything? Harry asked. Your memories will be relevant, Silvermark said, speaking for the first time in a surprisingly deep voice. With your permission, a memory projection charm will be used to visually demonstrate how the bindings affected key moments in your life. Harry frowned. You want to show my memories to the entire Wizengamot? Only those directly relevant to the bindings, Nagnock assured him. And you'll maintain control. You can terminate the projection at any point if it becomes too personal. Harry considered this. The idea of having his private memories displayed publicly was uncomfortable, but if it helped expose the truth. All right, he agreed reluctantly. But I get final say on what's shown. Of course, Nagnock said. Now, there's another matter. Several individuals have requested private meetings with you before the proceedings resume. Albus Dumbledore, Remus Lupin, and an unspeakable named Croaker. Dumbledore can wait, Harry said immediately. I'll see Professor Lupin, though. Who's Croaker? Head of the Department of Mysteries. Hermione supplied. The Unspeakables. He was implicated in some of the bindings yesterday, Nagnock reminded him. His signature appeared on several memory blocks and the enhancement to your scar connection. Harry's hand unconsciously rose to his forehead. The familiar lightning bolt felt different now, less an open wound and more a closed scar, still present but no longer constantly inflamed. I'll see him too, Harry decided. Might as well know what I'm facing. Remus Lupin looked terrible. The premature lines in his face seemed deeper, his hair grayer than when Harry had last seen him. But his amber eyes were clear and direct as he sat across from Harry in the suite's small sitting room. Thank you for seeing me, Lupin began, hands clasped tightly in his lap. I needed to tell you myself. I didn't know, Harry. About the bindings, any of it. I swear to you on James and Lily's memory. Harry studied his former professor carefully. With his enhanced senses, he could detect subtle shifts in Lupin's scent and heartbeat that suggested genuine distress and honesty. "I believe you," Harry said finally. "But where were you all those years? If you were my parents' friend, why did you never check on me before Hogwarts?" Pain flashed across Lupin's face. "I tried. After their deaths, I was broken. The wolf nearly took over completely. By the time I recovered enough to function, Dumbledore had established the blood wards. He convinced me that any contact might endanger you, that werewolf association would make your life with the Dursleys even more difficult." "And you believed him?" Harry said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "I did," Lupin admitted. "I've always trusted Dumbledore. He gave me a chance when no one else would. But now—" He shook his head. "I should have questioned. Should have demanded to see you myself." Harry considered this. The restored memories of baby Remus, Uncle Mooney, creating magical lights for him to chase contrasted sharply with the man's absence during his childhood. "The loyalty compulsions they found," Harry said slowly. "They affected how I felt about certain people. Made me trust Dumbledore unconditionally. Did he do something similar to you?" Lupin looked startled. I don't know. It never occurred to me. Maybe you should get checked by the Goblins," Harry suggested. "If Dumbledore was willing to bind me, who knows what he might have done to others?" The thought hung heavily between them. Lupin nodded slowly. "I will," he promised. "But regardless of any magical influence, I failed you, Harry. I should have been there." "Yes," Harry agreed, not softening the truth. "You should have been. But I understand better now why you weren't." Lupin's shoulders slumped with relief at this small measure of forgiveness. "What happens now? After the trial?" "I don't know," Harry admitted. "I can't go back to the Dursleys, not now that I know there might be other relatives out there. And Hogwarts." He trailed off, uncertain. "Whatever you decide," Lupin said firmly, "I'll support you. No more standing aside. If you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your life properly now." Harry nodded, a lump forming in his throat. It wasn't everything, but it was a start, another piece of his parents' world reconnecting with him. Unspeakable Croaker was nothing like Harry had imagined. Rather than the mysterious, hooded figure he'd expected, Croaker was a short, plump man with spectacles and thinning gray hair. He might have been someone's kindly grandfather, except for his eyes, sharp, analytical, and utterly without warmth. "Mr. Potter," he said, settling into the chair Lupin had vacated. "I appreciate your willingness to speak with me before today's proceedings. You're going to be implicated in several of the bindings," Harry said bluntly. "I want to know why." Croaker nodded, unperturbed by Harry's directness. "Understandable. I should begin by clarifying that my involvement was strictly professional. The Department of Mysteries exists to study the most profound aspects of magic, including prophecy, death, time, and unusual magical phenomena. Like me surviving the killing curse," Harry surmised. "Precisely. When Albus brought you to us after your parents' deaths, you presented an unprecedented case study. No one had ever survived that particular curse before. The magical signature left on you was extraordinary." Harry frowned. "Dumbledore brought me to the Department of Mysteries." "When?" "November 3, 1981. 3 days after the incident at Godric's Hollow." Croaker's voice remained clinical, detached. "You were unconscious, naturally. We conducted a series of non-invasive examinations before implementing the monitoring bindings." "Non-invasive?" Harry repeated skeptically. "No tissue was removed, no permanent alterations made beyond the bindings themselves," Croaker clarified. "We needed to understand what had happened to you, Mr. Potter. The implications for magical theory were immense." Harry felt his temper rising. "I wasn't a lab rat. I was a baby who just lost his parents." "Indeed. A tragic situation. But also a unique magical opportunity." Croaker adjusted his spectacles. "The bindings I placed were primarily monitoring spells, designed to record magical fluctuations, track the curse residue in your scar, and alert us to any unusual manifestations. And the enhancement to my scar connection? The one that made me feel Voldemort's emotions and see through his eyes? For the first time, Croaker looked slightly uncomfortable. A miscalculation. We theorized that the connection was a one-way residue, from him to you. The enhancement was meant to help us study how dark magic leaves imprints. We didn't anticipate that the connection was bidirectional, or that it would cause me years of pain and nightmares. Harry added bitterly. Regrettable side effects. Croaker acknowledged without real remorse. But the data we've gathered has been invaluable. Your unique connection to He Who Must Not Be Named has provided insights that could eventually help us understand how to counter similar dark magic. Harry stared at the man in disbelief. You're still justifying it. Even now, knowing what it did to me. Croaker met his gaze steadily. I am a researcher, Mr. Potter. My loyalty is to the advancement of magical knowledge. The bindings I placed caused discomfort, yes, but they were not among those suppressing your abilities or altering your personality. That was Dumbledore's doing, not mine. That's supposed to make me feel better? Harry demanded. It's merely a statement of fact. I will testify truthfully today about my involvement, and accept whatever consequences are determined appropriate. Croaker rose to leave. One thing you should know, however. The monitoring bindings recorded everything, including magical signatures that interacted with you over the years. Some of those signatures, well, they'll raise questions today that even I don't have answers for. What does that mean? Harry asked. But Croaker merely inclined his head. You'll see during the proceedings. Good day, Mr. Potter. By 10 o'clock, the ancient hall was even more crowded than the previous day. Word had spread about the revelations, drawing additional spectators, international representatives, magical scholars, and journalists from wizarding publications worldwide. Harry, Ron, and Hermione took their places in the witnesses' circle, all three dressed in formal robes. Harry's were the same ceremonial attire from yesterday, while Hermione and Ron wore simple but elegant blue and burgundy robes respectively. Remember, Hermione whispered as they sat down. They'll try to discredit you or minimize what happened. Stay calm, speak clearly, and don't let them provoke you into losing control. Easier said than done, Harry muttered, eyeing the Wizengamot members filing in. Most wouldn't meet his gaze directly, though a few, including Amelia Bones, gave him small nods of acknowledgement. Dumbledore entered last, no longer seated with the Wizengamot but in a special witness area. The former chief warlock looked diminished somehow, though he still carried himself with dignity. Beside him sat McGonagall, her expression rigid with suppressed emotion. At precisely 10, Ragnarok called the proceedings to order. Day 2 of the trial of magical justice will now commence. Today we will examine specific effects of the bindings identified yesterday, hear witness testimony regarding their implementation and impact, and consider historical context for these violations. Nagnok stepped forward. Our first witness is Unspeakable Croaker, whose magical signature appears on bindings 13 through 16. Croaker took the central dais, looking much as he had in Harry's suite, unperturbed and clinical. Under questioning from both Nagnok and Madame Bones, he explained his role in studying Harry as a unique magical case study. The Department of Mysteries has authority to monitor unusual magical phenomena, he stated. The surviving of a killing curse qualified as such. Our bindings were designed to gather data, not to suppress Mr. Potter's abilities. Yet you enhanced the connection to his curse scar, Madame Bones pointed out, causing years of pain and psychological distress. An unforeseen consequence, Croaker admitted. The connection proved more complex than our initial analysis suggested. When asked about other children who might have been subject to similar monitoring, Croaker became evasive, citing department secrecy protocols. It took direct intervention from the interim chief warlock, Augusta Longbottom, who had been appointed overnight, to force a partial answer. There have been other cases of interest, Croaker acknowledged reluctantly. Children with unusual magical manifestations or circumstances, including my grandson Neville? Madame Longbottom demanded, her formidable presence suddenly focused entirely on the unspeakable. Croaker's hesitation was answer enough. Murmurs spread through the chamber as people realized the implications. This wasn't just about Harry Potter. The Department of Mysteries had been studying, perhaps even magically manipulating, other magical children. I move that a full investigation of the department's practices regarding underage subjects be initiated immediately, Madame Longbottom declared, her voice brooking no argument. Seconded, called several voices at once. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Croaker was dismissed from the stand, looking significantly less composed than when he had arrived. Next came Silvermark, the Goblin historian, who provided context for why the bindings were particularly egregious from a magical perspective. Core magic is considered sacred in all magical traditions, he explained. To bind a magical child's core is to interfere with their very essence, their magical identity and potential. In Goblin society, such an act would be punishable by death. Yet wizarding law has no specific prohibition against such bindings, Madame Bones noted. Because they were presumed too obviously wrong to require explicit prohibition, Silvermark replied dryly. Much like wizarding law doesn't explicitly forbid removing another wizard's limbs, it falls under broader categories of assault and battery. His testimony continued, explaining how binding magic had historically been used for medical purposes, stabilizing damaged magical cores or preventing dangerous accidental magic in cases of trauma. But the comprehensive bindings placed on Harry were unprecedented in magical history. Even in cases where magical children displayed dangerous uncontrolled abilities, the standard procedure was focused intervention and training, not comprehensive suppression, Silvermark concluded. What was done to Mr. Potter violates not just wizarding law, but magical ethics recognized by all sentient magical communities. As the morning progressed, the full scope of the binding's effects became clearer. A magical theorist testified about the likely impact on Harry's development, physically, magically, and psychologically. A mind healer explained how memory blocks and emotional suppressors would have affected Harry's ability to process grief and form healthy attachments. Throughout these testimonies, Harry sat silently, his expression carefully controlled despite the growing anger churning inside him. These expert witnesses were discussing his life, his suffering, in detached, clinical terms, necessary for the proceedings, perhaps, but painful nonetheless. After a brief recess for lunch, the afternoon session began with the most difficult part for Harry, the memory projections. With Mr. Potter's consent, Nagnock explained, we will now demonstrate how specific bindings influence key moments in his life. This will provide concrete evidence of their effects beyond theoretical speculation. Harry took his place on the central dais, where a shallow stone basin had been placed, a pensive, but modified with additional enchantments to project the memories for all to see. The process is straightforward, Nagnock told him quietly. Think of a specific memory you believe was affected by the bindings. Touch your wand to your temple, focus on the memory, and then place the extracted memory strand in the basin. You maintain control throughout. You can end the projection at any time. Harry nodded, taking a deep breath. He'd spent part of the morning with Hermione, identifying memories that would best illustrate the binding's effects without being too personal or traumatic to share. He touched his wand to his temple, focusing on his first meeting with Dumbledore. A silvery strand clung to his wand as he pulled it away, depositing it in the pensieve. Immediately, a projection appeared above the basin, a three-dimensional scene from Harry's first year at Hogwarts. 11-year-old Harry sat in the hospital wing after the confrontation with Quirrell. Dumbledore explained about his mother's protection, about why Quirrell couldn't touch him. As they spoke, a golden aura became visible in the projection, not something Harry had seen at the time, but representing the loyalty compulsion binding that had been active during this interaction. This golden aura indicates the loyalty compulsion activating, Nagnock explained to the chamber. Note how it intensifies when Dumbledore withholds information or provides partial truths. The scene continued, showing young Harry accepting Dumbledore's vague explanations without question, despite their obvious inadequacy. When it concluded, Harry extracted another memory, this one from his second year, when he'd heard the basilisk's voice in the walls. The projection showed Harry hearing the voice, feeling afraid but also strangely drawn to it. A dark green aura, again not visible in the original memory, surrounded his scar, pulsing with each word from the basilisk. "This represents the Parseltongue binding," Nagnok explained. "It didn't suppress the ability itself, but added fear and negative emotional responses, while also connecting it to the enhanced scar binding." Memory after memory played out, Harry facing Dementors, being entered into the Triwizard Tournament, confronting Voldemort in the graveyard. Each showed different bindings activating, influencing his reactions, suppressing certain abilities while artificially enhancing others. The most disturbing was a memory from his childhood at the Dursleys. 10-year-old Harry, locked in his cupboard after an incident of accidental magic, his hands glowing with uncontrolled power as objects around him levitated. Then, abruptly, the glow fading as a binding activated remotely, suppressing the magical outburst and leaving Harry exhausted and confused. The remote suppression trigger, Nagnok identified. Activated when Mr. Potter's magic threatened to overcome the standard bindings during emotional distress. When the last memory faded, Harry felt drained. Exposing these private moments had been difficult, but seeing the visual evidence of how he'd been manipulated was somehow validating, proof that his life had indeed been interfered with in tangible, identifiable ways. The afternoon's final witness was Albus Dumbledore himself. The former chief warlock took the stand with quiet dignity, his blue eyes no longer twinkling but solemn behind his half-moon spectacles. "Headmaster Dumbledore," Madame Bones began, "your magical signature appears on 23 of the 29 bindings placed on Harry Potter. Do you acknowledge this fact?" "I do," Dumbledore replied simply. "Please explain to this body why you implemented these bindings, beginning with the core magic suppressors." Dumbledore folded his hands in his lap, gathering his thoughts. "To understand my actions, you must understand the context. On the night of October 31st, 1981, I arrived at Godric's Hollow to find James and Lily Potter dead, their home partially destroyed, and young Harry alive but bearing a cursed scar unlike anything I had ever encountered." He paused, the memory clearly still affecting him. The magical discharge from Voldemort's failed killing curse had saturated the area. But more concerning was Harry himself. His magical core was destabilized. Raw power was emanating from him in waves, burning everything it touched. He was unconscious, thankfully, but his magic was reacting defensively, lashing out at anyone who approached. Harry frowned. This wasn't part of any memory he'd recovered. "I implemented the first binding, a core stabilizer, out of immediate necessity. Without it, his magic might have burned itself out entirely, killing him in the process. The second binding, controlling the connection to his scar, was equally urgent. Dark magic was flowing both ways through that connection, and I feared it would corrupt his developing magical core. These emergency measures might be understandable," Madame Bones conceded. "But they don't explain the loyalty compulsions, the memory blocks, the behavioral modifiers placed years later." Dumbledore sighed heavily. "No, they don't. Those came after I had time to study the prophecy more thoroughly and understand what Harry would eventually face. The prophecy stating that Harry would have power the Dark Lord knows not," Madame Bones clarified. "Precisely. I interpreted this to mean Harry possessed magical potential beyond normal parameters, potentially dangerous without proper control. The additional bindings were implemented gradually, designed to ensure his power developed safely and directed toward the ultimate goal of defeating Voldemort." "So you shaped him as a weapon?" someone called from the chamber. Dumbledore shook his head. "I shaped him as a survivor. The bindings were never meant to be permanent, only to regulate his development until he was mature enough to handle his full abilities." "Yet you never told him about them," Madame Bones pointed out. "Never sought his consent as he grew old enough to understand." "A mistake," Dumbledore admitted. "One of many I've made. I believed I was protecting him, from external threats, and from the burden of his own power. I see now that my good intentions led to harmful consequences. Good intentions? Harry couldn't contain himself any longer, rising to his feet. You bound my magic, blocked my memories, made me reckless enough to nearly die multiple times, and kept me ignorant of basic information that might have helped me protect myself. How are any of those good intentions? Dumbledore turned to face him directly. Harry, I never intended for you to suffer. The bindings were meant to be gradually removed beginning in your 6th year, as your magical maturity approached. The memory blocks were to shield you from trauma until you were ready. The behavioral modifications. He hesitated. Tell the truth, Harry demanded. All of it. The behavioral modifications were to ensure you would be willing to make the necessary sacrifice when the time came. Dumbledore said quietly. I still believe, that Voldemort created a Horcrux the night he tried to kill you. That a fragment of his soul attached itself to yours, residing in your scar. And that to truly defeat him, that fragment would need to be destroyed. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Creating a Horcrux, splitting one's soul through murder to achieve immortality, was among the darkest magic known. You're saying part of Voldemort lives in me? Harry asked, his voice barely audible. I believe so, yes. And I feared that when the time came to confront this truth, self-preservation might overcome your natural courage. The bindings ensured you would place others' safety above your own, a quality you already possessed naturally, but one I enhanced. The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Harry sank back into his seat, mind reeling. A piece of Voldemort was inside him? Had been there all along? Madame Bones cleared her throat, breaking the silence. Headmaster, even accepting your explanation, the methods you chose violated fundamental magical ethics. There were alternatives: consultation with other magical experts, transparency with Mr. Potter as he matured, traditional training methods to help him control his abilities. In retrospect, yes, Dumbledore agreed. I became too accustomed to carrying burdens alone, making unilateral decisions for what I perceived as the greater good. I failed to consider that by denying Harry agency, I was committing the same sin as those who would control him through more overtly malicious means. The questioning continued for another hour, delving into specific bindings and their intended purposes. Throughout, Dumbledore remained composed but increasingly remorseful, acknowledging errors in judgment, while maintaining that his ultimate goal had been Harry's survival against Voldemort. When Dumbledore was finally dismissed, Ragnarok announced an unexpected witness. The Goblin Nation calls Unspeakable Bode to testify regarding binding signatures that cannot be identified through standard magical means. A thin, straw-haired wizard Harry vaguely recognized took the stand. Broderick Bode, according to Hermione's whisper, was another unspeakable who specialized in magical residue analysis. During our examination of Mr. Potter's bindings, Ragnarok explained, we discovered 3 signatures that did not match any living witch or wizard in Ministry records. Unspeakable Bode has analyzed these anomalous signatures at our request. Bode looked distinctly uncomfortable as he began his testimony. The signatures in question are highly unusual. They appear to be fragmented, partial magical impressions rather than complete signatures. 2 show characteristics of deterioration consistent with signatures from deceased individuals. Deceased individuals can't cast bindings. Someone objected from the Wisengamot section. Correct. Bode agreed. Which suggests these bindings were placed before the individual's deaths, or through magical artifacts containing their signature residue. Have you identified these individuals? Madame Bones asked. Bode hesitated. With 70% confidence, yes. The first signature contains elements consistent with Lily Potter née Evans. The second matches partial records for James Potter. Harry's heart seemed to stop. My parents? He whispered. The third signature is the most troubling. Bode continued. It contains elements matching Tom Marvolo Riddle, known later as Lord Voldemort. The chamber erupted in shock and confusion. Harry barely heard it, his mind struggling to process this information. His parents had placed bindings on him? And Voldemort? Ragnarok called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. When the chamber had quieted, he addressed Bode directly. Explain the nature of these 3 anomalous bindings. The Lily Potter signature appears on a binding we've classified as a sacrificial protection shield, likely connected to her known sacrifice that protected Mr. Potter from the killing curse. It's not a restrictive binding per se, but more an active protection that draws on Mr. Potter's magic to maintain itself. That aligned with what Dumbledore had told Harry about his mother's protection, though the idea that it had been draining his magic was new. The James Potter signature appears on what we've termed a hereditary magic suppressor. This binding specifically limited Mr. Potter's access to family magics, inherited magical affinities or abilities passed through the Potter bloodline. Why would my father block my access to family magic? Harry asked, unable to keep silent. That, Bode said carefully, is unclear. But the binding appears to have been temporary by design, set to dissolve naturally around Mr. Potter's 17th birthday. And the 3rd binding? Madame Bones prompted. The one bearing traces of he who must not be named signature? Bode's discomfort visibly increased. That binding is unlike any we've studied before. It appears to be unintentional, a magical parasite rather than a constructed binding. It's centered on Mr. Potter's scar and has characteristics consistent with extremely dark magic, specifically soul magic. Consistent with Headmaster Dumbledore's theory about a Horcrux. Madame Bones clarified. Potentially, yes. Bode seemed relieved to have someone else say the word. However, its structure differs from theoretical Horcrux models. It appears damaged, incomplete, as if it formed accidentally rather than through the standard ritual process. Harry felt ill. The idea of carrying a piece of Voldemort's soul had been disturbing enough. Learning that this fragment had been actively influencing his magic for years was nauseating. This parasitic binding, Nagnok asked, how does it interact with Mr. Potter's magic? It appears to create a drain similar to the sacrificial protection, but with a corrupt purpose. Where the mother's protection shields, this binding infects. It's been slowly introducing foreign magical patterns into Mr. Potter's core, patterns consistent with Riddle's known magical signature. Harry stood abruptly. Are you saying I've been turning into Voldemort? His voice came out sharper than intended, fear making it brittle. No, Mr. Potter, Bode said quickly. Your core magic has been fighting this influence successfully. The Parseltongue ability appears to be the only skill that transferred completely. Other attempted transfers were blocked, partly by your natural resistance, partly by Dumbledore's bindings, ironically. So Dumbledore was binding me to protect me from being corrupted by Voldemort's soul piece. Harry summarized, trying to make sense of it all. That appears to be part of his motivation, yes, Bode confirmed. Though his methods were excessive. Excessive. Such a mild word for what had been done to him. Harry fought down hysterical laughter. Can it be removed? He asked instead. This soul fragment? Bode exchanged glances with Nagnok. Theoretically, yes, the Goblin curse breaker answered. But the process would be extremely dangerous. The fragment has been integrated with your magic for nearly 14 years. Extracting it improperly could damage your magical core permanently. But leaving it in place is not an option, Ragnarok added firmly. A consultation of experts will be assembled to address this specific issue separately from the trial proceedings. The day's testimony concluded with this unsettling revelation. As the chamber began to empty, Harry remained seated, trying to process everything he learned. His parents had placed bindings on him, presumably for protection. Voldemort had accidentally left a soul fragment in his scar. And Dumbledore, knowing these things, had added his own layers of bindings that went far beyond necessary protection. Harry? Hermione's voice broke through his thoughts. Are you all right? Not really, he admitted. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. Part of me is apparently Voldemort. My parents put bindings on me before they died. Dumbledore spent years shaping me into some kind of sacrificial weapon. Who am I under all that? Was anything in my life ever really mine? Ron placed a hand on his shoulder. You're Harry, he said simply. Not the boy who lived, not Dumbledore's project, not a Horcrux carrier. Just Harry. Our friend. The bloke who saved my sister from a basilisk, and who flies like he was born on a broom. That's who you are. The straightforward certainty in Ron's voice was strangely comforting. Harry managed a weak smile. Thanks, Ron. Mr. Potter, came Nagnock's voice as the goblin approached. There's been a development you should know about. Several international representatives have requested to meet with you this evening. The American Magical Congress, the Japanese Magical Coalition, and the International Confederation's Youth Protection Division. Why? Harry asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. He'd had enough of being examined and discussed for one day. Your case has broader implications than just British wizarding law, Nagnock explained delicately. There are concerns about how similar situations might be handled globally, and interest in establishing new international protections. So I'm becoming a political cause, Harry said flatly. You're becoming a catalyst for change, Hermione corrected gently. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Harry sighed. Fine. I'll meet them. But not tonight. I need time to process everything first. Nagnock nodded. I'll arrange for tomorrow morning, before the final session. As they left the chamber, Harry noticed a small commotion near one of the exits. A group of wizards in expensive-looking robes were arguing with security goblins, gesturing emphatically. What's going on there? He asked Nagnock. The goblin's expression soured. Representatives from Gringotts, Paris. They're claiming jurisdiction over aspects of your case due to historical connections between the Potter family and French magical nobility. I have French connections? Harry asked, surprised. The Potter line has branches throughout magical Europe. Nagnock confirmed. Another matter we would have discussed once the binding trial concluded. Your family history is more extensive than you've been led to believe. Another piece of information kept from him. Harry wasn't even surprised anymore. Back at the Leaky Cauldron, Harry, Ron, and Hermione gathered in the sitting room of Harry's suite, trying to make sense of the day's revelations. Harry had been quiet during their walk back, lost in thought about Horcruxes, soul fragments, and family bindings. I've been doing some research, Hermione said, pulling several books from her seemingly bottomless bag. About hereditary magic and family bindings. It's actually not uncommon for old magical families to place temporary restrictions on children's access to family magics until they reach magical maturity. Why would they do that? Harry asked. Protection, mainly, Ron explained, again surprising them with his knowledge. Some family magics can be dangerous if accessed too early. The Weasleys don't have many, we're not an ancient house, but even we have traditions about certain spells that can't be taught until you're of age. So my father might have been protecting me by blocking Potter family magic. Harry mused. That makes sense, I guess. But it doesn't explain all the other bindings. No, Hermione agreed. Dumbledore went far beyond protective measures. And this Horcrux business. She shuddered. I've read about them. They're mentioned in Magic Most Evil, though only briefly. The book calls them the wickedest of magical inventions and refuses to give details. If part of Voldemort is inside me, Harry said slowly, does that mean I can't die until that part is destroyed? Is that why I survived the killing curse in the graveyard? Hermione looked troubled. I don't know. The theory makes a certain horrible sense, but without more information. We need to talk to someone who really understands this stuff, Ron said. Not Dumbledore, he's kept too many secrets. Maybe Bill? He's a curse breaker, deals with dark objects all the time. That's actually a good idea. Harry agreed. Could you write to him? Ron nodded. Already did. Sent an hour right after today's session. Figured we needed all the help we could get. Harry looked at his friend with newfound appreciation. Ron had been surprisingly proactive and insightful throughout this ordeal, showing a strategic mind that Harry had previously only glimpsed during chess matches. There's something else we should consider, Hermione said hesitantly. Your family connections, Harry. If you really do have magical relatives out there, I need to find them, Harry finished. Especially now that the blood protection at the Dursleys is compromised. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. But how? I don't even know where to start looking. Gringotts would have records, Ron suggested. Inheritance tests, family trees, that sort of thing. We can ask Nagnok tomorrow. Hermione agreed. If there are Potter relatives, or Evan's relatives with magic, the Goblins would know. A knock at the door interrupted their planning. Ron answered it, then stepped back to admit Madame Bones, looking tired but determined. Mr. Potter. She greeted him formally. I apologize for the intrusion, but there are matters we need to discuss privately. Harry nodded to his friends, who took the hint and excused themselves, promising to return in the morning before the final session. What's happened? Harry asked once they were alone. Madame Bones sank into an armchair, looking uncharacteristically weary. Several things. First, the Wizengamot has voted to remove the underage magic restrictions from your wand, effective immediately. Given your unique magical situation and the security concerns, you're being granted an exemption. I can do magic outside school? Harry clarified, surprised by this unexpected benefit. Yes, though I'd advise discretion around Muggles, obviously. She handed him an official-looking document. This certifies the exemption. Keep it with you in case you're questioned. Thank you, Harry said, genuinely appreciative of this small freedom. There's more, Bones continued. Following today's revelations, the DMLE has opened formal investigations into both Albus Dumbledore and the Department of Mysteries. We're also reviewing Sirius Black's case in light of evidence that memory bindings may have affected witness testimonies during his original non-trial. Harry's heart leapt. You believe Sirius is innocent? Let's say I find the lack of a trial troubling, and new evidence suggests tampering with key memories. It's enough to justify a formal review. Bones's expression turned grave. However, this brings me to the most urgent matter. There have been threats made against your life. That's hardly new, Harry pointed out. These are different. Our intelligence suggests Death Eaters are planning to target you specifically because of the Soul Fragment revelation. If Voldemort's Horcrux is truly within you, they may see destroying you as a way to protect their master's immortality. Harry hadn't considered this angle. So I'm in danger from both sides now. Voldemort wants to kill me because of the prophecy, and his followers want to keep me alive because I'm carrying part of his soul. Precisely. Which is why security arrangements are being enhanced. Oris Shacklebolt and Tonks will be stationed here tonight, and tomorrow we'll discuss longer-term protection options. After Madame Bones left, Harry found himself alone with his thoughts. The room felt too quiet, too confining for the storm of emotions inside him. On impulse, he opened the window and gazed out at the night sky over Diagon Alley. Everything had changed so rapidly. 3 days ago, he'd been Harry Potter, the boy who lived, grieving Cedric's death and dreading another summer with the Dursleys. Now he was, what exactly? Unbound Harry? The boy with Voldemort's soul fragment? A political symbol for magical children's rights? He flexed his fingers, watching as small sparks of magic danced across his skin. His power felt different now, not just stronger, but more in tune with his will. Magic had always required effort, concentration, precise wand movements, and incantations. Now it felt like an extension of himself, responsive to his intentions in a way he never experienced before. Experimentally, Harry held out his hand and thought about light. A small, perfect sphere of golden radiance formed above his palm, illuminating the room with warm light. He hadn't used an incantation or his wand, just will and intent. Wandless magic, he murmured, both awed and disturbed by how easy it had been. Was this his true potential? What Dumbledore had feared enough to bind? The light sphere floated upward, hovering near the ceiling. Harry focused on it, willing it to change color. The golden glow shifted to blue, then green, then a soft lavender, responding instantly to his thoughts. He extinguished it with a thought, plunging the room back into darkness except for the moonlight streaming through the window. This new power was exhilarating but also frightening. Would he have been able to learn control naturally if Dumbledore had given him the chance? Or would his untrained abilities have been dangerous, as the headmaster claimed? Harry didn't know the answer, but he was determined to prove he could master his unbound magic safely. Whatever he was becoming, it would be on his own terms, not Dumbledore's, not the Ministry's, and certainly not Voldemort's. Morning brought a clear sky and renewed determination. Harry woke early, feeling more rested than he had in years despite the emotional turmoil of the previous day. His magic had stabilized somewhat overnight, no longer leaking through his skin in visible manifestations but instead circulating smoothly within him, accessible but contained. After a quick breakfast with Ron and Hermione, Harry met with the international representatives as Nagnuk had arranged. The meeting was held in a private room at Gringotts, with representatives from the American Magical Congress, the Japanese Magical Coalition, the French Magical Assembly, and the International Confederation's Youth Protection Division. To Harry's surprise, they were less interested in examining him like a curiosity and more focused on establishing new protections for magical children globally. "What happened to you represents a systemic failure," explained Keiko Tanaka, the Japanese representative. "Not just of British magical governance, but of international oversight. We have treaties protecting magical creatures, regulations for the treatment of magical artifacts, but somehow the magical rights of children have fallen through the cracks. We're proposing a new international protocol," added Samuel Green of the American delegation. "Mandatory monitoring for orphan magical children, regular health screenings that would detect bindings or other interference, and clear legal standards for when intervention in a child's magic is permitted." They outlined a comprehensive framework that would prevent future cases like Harry's, while also respecting cultural differences in how magic was taught and developed. By the end of the 2-hour meeting, Harry found himself cautiously optimistic that some genuine good might come from his ordeal. "They want to call it the Potter Protocol," Brown said afterward, looking impressed. "You'll be in magical law books for something besides surviving the killing curse." "I'd rather be in no books at all," Harry replied honestly. "But if it helps protect other kids, I'll support it." Before the final trial session, they had one more important meeting, with Nagnuk and the Goblin genealogy specialist Gornak, regarding Harry's family connections. "The binding concealing your family connections was among the most sophisticated we've encountered," Gornak explained, unrolling an elaborate parchment across the table. "It didn't just block your awareness of magical relatives, it actively interfered with magical inheritance tests and family tracing spells. So that's why no one ever told me about other relatives," Harry realized. "They couldn't find them magically." "Precisely. However, with the binding removed, we can now perform an accurate heritage trace." Gornak produced a small silver knife. 3 drops of blood on the parchment, if you please." Harry hesitated only briefly before pricking his finger and allowing 3 drops of blood to fall onto the center of the parchment. The blood shimmered and then spread outward in thin red lines, forming an intricate family tree. "Fascinating," Gornak murmured as the pattern developed. "The Potter line is, as expected, an ancient one, with connections to several prominent magical families. Your father was more distantly related to the Black family, which makes Sirius Black your second cousin once removed, in addition to being your godfather." That explained the familial feeling Harry had always had towards Sirius. "Are there any living relatives on the Potter side?" "Several distant cousins in France, as we suspected. A second cousin twice removed in Australia. And..." Gornak paused, studying a particular branch. "Most interestingly, a first cousin on your mother's side." "My mother had magical relatives?" Harry asked, stunned. "But she was Muggle-born." "Apparently not," Gornak said, tracing the line with one long finger. "Her father was a squib, born to a magical family but without magic himself. He was apparently unaware of his heritage, having been adopted by Muggles as an infant." "Who is this cousin?" Harry demanded, his heart racing. "Are they magical?" Gornak nodded. A witch, approximately your age. Her mother was your mother's sister. Aunt Petunia had another child? Harry asked, confused. No, another sister. It appears your maternal grandmother had a child before marrying your grandfather, a daughter who was given up for adoption. This daughter grew up, married a wizard, and had a magical child, your cousin. Harry's head spun with this revelation. My mother had a half-sister she never knew about. And I have a cousin who's a witch? Who is she? Where is she now? Gornak consulted the parchment. Her name is listed here as Anastasia Burke. She would be approximately 16 years old now. Her last known residence was in northern Scotland. Burke? Hermione repeated, looking troubled. Like Borgin and Burke's? The dark artifacts shop? The Burke family has branches beyond the shop proprietors. Nagnok noted. Though they do tend to maintain certain traditional values. You mean they're likely pure-blood supremacists? Harry translated bluntly. Many branches of the family, yes. Gornak confirmed. Though we cannot know this specific individual's views without meeting her. Harry stared at the parchment, tracing the line connecting him to this unknown cousin. A blood relative who was magical, close to his own age. It was something he dreamed about for years. Family who might actually want him, who shared his world. But if she came from a family with pure blood leanings, is there any way to contact her? He asked finally. We can send a formal notification of familial connection through Gringotts. Gornak offered. It would be magically verified and protected, allowing her to respond privately if she wishes. Do it, Harry decided. She deserves to know she has family, even if she wants nothing to do with me. With that matter settled, they made their way to the ancient hall for the final day of the trial. The atmosphere was different today, less shocked outrage, more focused determination. The previous day's revelations had been processed, and now it was time for resolution and consequences. Ragnarok called the proceedings to order promptly. Today we conclude the trial of magical justice for Harry James Potter. We will hear final testimony regarding the soul fragment discovered in Mr. Potter's scar, determine appropriate consequences for those responsible for the illegal bindings, and establish protocols to prevent such violations in future. The day's first witness was a surprise to Harry, Nicholas Flamel. The ancient alchemist, who Harry had believed dead after the destruction of the Philosopher's Stone, approached the central dais with the careful movements of extreme age. Monsieur Flamel. Ragnarok greeted him with unusual deference. The court appreciates your willingness to testify on such short notice. When I learned of the Horcrux situation, I could not remain silent. Flamel replied, his French accent still noticeable despite centuries living in England. There are few alive today who have studied soul magic as extensively as I have. Please share your expertise regarding the soul fragment in Mr. Potter's scar. Ragnarok prompted. Flamel turned to look directly at Harry. Young Mr. Potter, I have reviewed the magical scans performed by the Goblin curse breakers and the unspeakables. What you carry is indeed a fragment of Tom Riddle's soul, but it is not a true Horcrux as traditionally defined. What's the difference? Harry asked. A true Horcrux is created through a specific ritual involving deliberate murder and specific spellwork. The soul fragment is then housed in an inanimate object prepared to receive it. What you carry appears to be an accidental fragment, created when Riddle's already unstable soul shattered upon the backlash of his failed killing curse. Can it be removed safely? This was the question that had been haunting Harry since the revelation. Yes, Flamel said confidently. Unlike a true Horcrux, this fragment never properly bonded with your soul. It exists as a parasite, not an integrated part of you. The process will be uncomfortable but not life-threatening. Relief flooded through Harry. How soon can it be done? I have already begun preparations. Flamel replied. With the court's permission, we could perform the extraction ritual tomorrow at my laboratory. I would be assisted by my wife Perenelle and a team of Goblin curse breakers. The court grants permission, Ragnarok declared without hesitation. Arrangements will be made for Mr. Potter's transportation and security. After Flamel's testimony, the trial moved to its final phase, determining consequences for those responsible for the bindings. Unspeakable Croaker and several Department of Mysteries employees were placed on suspension pending a full investigation. Madame Pomfrey, who had placed medical bindings at Dumbledore's direction, was cleared of wrongdoing but required to undergo ethics training regarding patient autonomy. Professor McGonagall, whose signature appeared on the academic limiter, approached the stand with uncharacteristic hesitation. Her testimony revealed she had believed she was implementing a standard magical training restriction used for exceptionally powerful students. "I was told it was temporary, a way to ensure Mr. Potter mastered the fundamentals before attempting more advanced transfiguration," she explained, her Scottish accent more pronounced with emotion. "I would never have agreed had I understood the true nature of what I was participating in." Harry believed her. The binding with her signature had been among the least restrictive, and he'd always felt McGonagall treated him fairly, if strictly. Finally, it was time for Dumbledore's consequences to be announced. The former Chief Warlock stood before the Wizengamot, head held high despite the gravity of the situation. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore," Madame Bones began formally. "You have been found responsible for implementing 23 illegal magical bindings on Harry James Potter, violating his magical autonomy, interfering with his natural development, and causing demonstrable harm despite claimed protective intentions." Dumbledore inclined his head, accepting the judgment. "In recognition of your previous service to the wizarding world, and acknowledging your claimed motivations were not malicious, the Wizengamot has determined the following consequences." The chamber fell silent as she continued. "You are permanently removed from your positions as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot and Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. Your Order of Merlin, First Class, is revoked. You will remain on probation as Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for a period of 1 year, during which an oversight committee will monitor all interactions with students." These were significant penalties, Harry realized. Dumbledore was losing most of his political power and much of his societal standing. "You will provide full disclosure to Mr. Potter regarding all information pertinent to his life, the prophecy concerning him, and Voldemort's return. You will place these memories in a pensieve for preservation should any additional information be required in future. You will make magical restitution to Mr. Potter in a form and amount to be determined by Gringotts' calculations of magical energy improperly restricted." Dumbledore accepted each pronouncement with quiet dignity. When Madame Bones finished, he turned to face Harry directly. "I accept these consequences as just," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "And I offer you my sincere apology, Harry. I believed I was acting in your best interests, but I failed to respect your right to determine your own path. I can only hope that in time, you might understand, if not forgive." Harry met the old wizard's gaze steadily. "I understand your reasons better now," he said carefully. "But understanding isn't the same as accepting. You had no right to shape me according to your vision, no matter how noble you thought that vision was." "No," Dumbledore agreed quietly. "I did not. A final matter remained: Harry's future living arrangements. With the blood wards compromised and his legal status in question, a decision needed to be made about his guardianship. Given the unique circumstances, Madame Bones proposed, I recommend that Mr. Potter be declared magically emancipated. While he would remain under the protection of Hogwarts during the school year, he would have legal authority over his own magical decisions and living arrangements." This suggestion caused considerable debate among the Wizengamot members. Some argued Harry was too young for such responsibility. Others pointed out that his magical maturity, accelerated by the removal of the bindings, made him effectively of age magically if not chronologically. In the end, a compromise was reached. Harry would be granted limited emancipation, control over his magical education, healthcare, and financial matters, while remaining under the nominal guardianship of a committee including Madame Bones, Professor McGonagall, and Remus Lupin. This arrangement will be reviewed when Mr. Potter reaches 16. Madame Bones clarified. With full emancipation to follow unless circumstances indicate otherwise. With this final decision, The trial of magical justice was formally concluded. Ragnarok struck a small gong 3 times, its resonant sound filling the chamber. Justice has been witnessed, he declared in the traditional closing. Magic has been honored. Balance has been restored. As the assembled witches and wizards began to disperse, Harry remained seated, feeling strangely detached from the proceedings. So much had changed in 3 days. His magic, his memories, his understanding of his past and future, all transformed. Even his physical appearance had continued to evolve as the binding's effects fully dissipated. "You all right, mate?" Ron asked, concern evident in his voice. Harry nodded slowly. "I think I will be. It's just a lot to process." "What will you do now?" Hermione asked. "About living arrangements, I mean." It was a good question. The Dursleys were no longer an option, not that he'd ever want to return there. Sirius was still a fugitive, despite the review of his case. The Weasleys would welcome him, he knew, but after learning of Mrs. Weasley's involvement in the loyalty compulsions, he needed time before he could comfortably stay at the Burrow. "Gringotts mentioned the Potter family owns several properties," he said. "I'm going to look into those. But first, I need to deal with this soul fragment." The extraction ritual with Flammel would be the next day, followed by a thorough magical health assessment. After that, he would need to make decisions about his education, whether to return to Hogwarts under Dumbledore's probationary headmastership, or explore alternatives. And somewhere out there was a cousin he'd never known existed, Anastasia Burke, his mother's sister's daughter. Would she respond to his message? Would she want anything to do with him? Or would pureblood prejudice keep them apart, as it had so many magical families? As they left the ancient hall, reporters clamored for comments, magical cameras flashing. Harry ignored them, keeping his gaze fixed ahead as Auror's Shacklebolt and Tonks cleared a path. He wasn't ready to make public statements, not when he was still figuring out who he was without the bindings that had shaped his life for so long. Back at the Leaky Cauldron, Harry stood by the window of his suite, watching the bustle of Diagon Alley below. Witches and wizards moved through their daily lives, many undoubtedly discussing the revelations from the trial. Would anything really change because of what had happened? Or would the wizarding world simply absorb the shock and continue as before? "Harry?" Hermione's voice broke through his thoughts. "Nicholas Flamel is here to see you. He says it's about tomorrow's ritual." Harry turned from the window, surprised. "Send him in." The ancient alchemist entered slowly, his aged appearance belying the sharp intelligence in his eyes. "Mr. Potter, I hope you don't mind the unscheduled visit. I wanted to speak with you privately before tomorrow's procedure." "Of course." Harry gestured to a chair. "Is there a problem with the ritual?" No, Flammel assured him, lowering himself carefully into the offered seat. "The preparations are proceeding well. But there are aspects of soul magic that are better discussed without an audience of politicians and reporters." Harry sat opposite him, curious. "What do you mean?" Flammel regarded him thoughtfully. "When we remove the soul fragment tomorrow, you will experience a significant adjustment. For nearly 14 years, this fragment has been interacting with your magic, creating patterns your core has adapted to work around. Its removal will require your magic to reorganize itself." "Is that dangerous?" Harry asked. "Not dangerous, but potentially transformative. Your magical affinities may shift. Abilities that were suppressed by the fragment's presence might emerge. You may find your magical strengths and weaknesses are entirely different than what you've experienced thus far." Harry hadn't considered this. "So I'll need to relearn how to use my magic?" "To some extent, yes. But more importantly, you'll need to rediscover who you are magically." Flammel leaned forward slightly. "There is a branch of alchemy that deals not with transforming metals, but with transforming the self, finding one's true magical nature beneath accumulated layers of experience and expectation. Like removing the bindings has been doing." Harry realized. "Precisely. But where those removals were restoring you to what you should have been all along, tomorrow's ritual will open a new chapter, a truly clean slate magically speaking." Flamel's ancient eyes held Harry's gaze. It is an opportunity few ever receive, the chance to discover your magic anew, without external influences. Something about the alchemist's words resonated with Harry. A clean slate. A chance to discover who he was meant to be, not who Dumbledore had shaped him to be or who the wizarding world expected him to be. "How do I make the most of this opportunity?" he asked. Flamel smiled slightly. "After the ritual, take time for yourself. Listen to your magic. Let it guide you rather than forcing it into patterns you're familiar with. Magic responds to our deepest selves, not just our intentions and incantations, but our nature." "My nature," Harry repeated thoughtfully. "I'm not sure I know what that is anymore. Few do at your age, even without the extraordinary circumstances you've faced." Flamel rose slowly to his feet. "But you have friends who see you clearly, Mr. Potter. And you have a strength of character that has withstood tremendous interference. Trust in those foundations as you rebuild your understanding of yourself." After the alchemist departed, Harry remained deep in thought. Tomorrow would bring another transformation, perhaps the most significant yet. The removal of Voldemort's soul fragment would free him from a connection that had defined much of his life, for better or worse. What would he discover about himself once that influence was gone? Who was Harry Potter beneath all the layers of prophecy, magical manipulation, and others' expectations? For the first time, he felt genuine curiosity about the answer, rather than fear. Whatever emerged from tomorrow's ritual, one thing was certain: he would face it on his own terms, with his magic fully his own at last. The dawn brought rain to London, droplets streaming down the windows of the leaky cauldron as Harry prepared for the soul extraction ritual. He dressed in simple clothing as instructed by Flamel, loose cotton trousers and a shirt without metal fastenings or magical enhancements. Ron and Hermione waited in the sitting room, both tense with anticipation. They wouldn't be permitted to attend the ritual itself but had insisted on accompanying Harry to Flamel's laboratory. "How do you feel?" Hermione asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Ready," Harry said, surprising himself with how true it felt. "I want this thing out of me." "Bill sent an owl," Ron said, holding up a letter. "He's gotten permission from the Goblins to observe the ritual as a professional curse breaker. Says he'll meet us there." Harry appreciated that, another friendly face, and someone with expertise he trusted. The Weasleys might have complicated feelings now given their mother's involvement in the loyalty compulsions, but he didn't doubt Bill's integrity. Their escort arrived promptly at 8, Oris Tonks and Shacklebolt, along with Nagnock and another goblin Harry hadn't met before. "This is Steelclaw," Nagnock introduced the newcomer. "A specialist in soul magic who will assist Flamel with the ritual." Steelclaw inclined his head slightly, his expression severe even by goblin standards. "The preparations are complete. We should depart immediately to maintain the ritual timing." They traveled by specialized goblin portkey, a small golden disc that transported them directly to Flamel's laboratory without the disorientation of standard portkeys. Harry landed steadily, another benefit of his unbound magic's improved coordination with his physical body. Flamel's laboratory was nothing like Harry had imagined. Instead of the cluttered medieval workshop he'd envisioned, it was a light-filled circular room with high windows and walls lined with crystalline structures that hummed with magical energy. At the center stood a raised platform of white stone, surrounded by 7 pillars of different colored minerals. Nicholas Flamel and his wife Perenelle greeted them at the entrance. Despite their extreme age, the couple moved with surprising grace. Perenelle Flamel was tall and elegant, her silver hair elaborately braided with golden threads. "Welcome, Mr. Potter," she said, her voice melodious despite its age. "We have prepared everything for the extraction." Bill Weasley stood to one side, his long red hair tied back, dragon-tooth earring catching the light. "Harry," he greeted with a nod. "Quite the setup they've got here." After brief explanations of the ritual process, it was time for Harry to say goodbye to Ron and Hermione, who would wait in an adjoining chamber. "We'll be right outside," Hermione promised, hugging him tightly. "Try not to explode or anything," Ron added with forced levity, clapping him on the shoulder. Once they'd left, Harry was directed to remove his shoes and lie on the central platform. The stone was surprisingly warm beneath him, humming with contained magic. The ritual has 3 phases. Flamel explained as Perenelle drew complex patterns in the air with a wand of unusual pale wood. First, we will isolate the soul fragment, preventing it from fighting or hiding. Then we extract it from your scar. Finally, we contain and neutralize it. Will it hurt? Harry asked, remembering the pain of the binding removals. There will be discomfort. Flamel acknowledged. But we've incorporated pain management into the ritual structure. You will remain conscious throughout. Your magic must actively participate for the extraction to succeed. Steelclaw and Nagnok took positions at 2 of the pillars, while Bill stationed himself near Harry's head, ready to monitor the cursed scar directly. The Flamel stood at opposite ends of the platform, Nicholas at Harry's feet and Perenelle at his head. We begin, Nicholas announced. What followed was unlike any magic Harry had experienced before. The Flamels began chanting in what sounded like Latin mixed with something older, their voices weaving together in perfect harmony. The Goblin curse breakers added percussive elements, tapping rhythmic patterns on the crystal pillars. Bill Weasley maintained a steady stream of diagnostic spells, his wand moving in precise, economical gestures over Harry's scar. The air grew thick with magic, colors swirling above Harry's body like aurora borealis. He felt pressure building in his forehead, centered on his scar, not pain exactly, but an intense awareness, as if something long dormant was now fully awake. The fragment is isolated, Perenelle announced, her eyes fixed on a point just above Harry's forehead. Beginning extraction. The pressure intensified, becoming a pulling sensation. Harry could feel something resisting, fighting to remain attached to him. A high, cold voice echoed in his mind, wordless but filled with rage. It's fighting, Harry gasped. I can hear it, feel it, trying to stay. Your magic must reject it, Nicholas instructed calmly. Visualize your core magic pushing the fragment away. It has no true claim on you. Harry closed his eyes, focusing on his magic as he'd been learning to do since the bindings were removed. He could sense it clearly now, a golden energy flowing through him, warm and familiar. The soul fragment appeared in his mind's eye as a black, oily stain attempting to merge with this golden flow. No, Harry thought firmly. You're not me. You never were. Get out. His magic responded instantly, surging against the dark presence. The pulling sensation increased dramatically, and Harry felt a sharp, tearing pain as something was ripped away from him. He might have screamed, he wasn't sure, but then the pain vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of lightness. Containment! Flamel called sharply. Through half-closed eyes, Harry watched as a writhing black mist was drawn into a crystal sphere held by Perenelle. The sphere darkened, pulsing with malevolent energy, before Steelclaw encased it in a series of goblin-forged metal bands that gradually stilled its movements. Extraction complete, Perenelle announced, her voice betraying slight fatigue. The fragment is contained. Harry lay motionless, adjusting to the strange new emptiness where the soul fragment had been. His scar felt cool for the first time he could remember, no lingering burn or itch. But more than that, his mind felt clearer, as if a constant background static he never consciously noticed had suddenly stopped. How do you feel, Mr. Potter? Nicholas asked, approaching the platform. Different, Harry managed. Empty, but in a good way. Like something heavy is gone. Bill Weasley was casting diagnostic spells over Harry's scar. The dark signature is completely removed, he confirmed, sounding impressed. I've never seen such a clean extraction. The scar itself will fade gradually, Perenelle added. It was created and maintained partly by the fragment's presence. Without it, it's just an ordinary wound mark that will heal with time. Harry reached up to touch his forehead, finding the familiar lightning bolt shape still there but flatter, less pronounced. The thought that it might eventually disappear entirely was strangely liberating, no more visible mark of his connection to Voldemort. What happens to that? He asked, nodding toward the contained soul fragment. It will be destroyed, Steelclaw said firmly. Soul fragments cannot exist independently for long without a proper vessel. Once it weakens sufficiently, we can eliminate it completely. Harry nodded, relief washing through him. One less piece of Voldemort in the world. One less connection between them. After a period of rest and monitoring, Harry was declared stable enough to leave the ritual space. He walked somewhat unsteadily into the adjoining chamber where Ron and Hermione waited anxiously. "Harry!" Hermione exclaimed, jumping to her feet. "Are you all right? Your scar looks different." "It worked," he told them, a smile spreading across his face. "It's gone. Really gone." Ron studied him. "You look different. Not just the scar, something about your eyes or expression." "I feel different," Harry admitted. "Lighter. More myself, somehow." Flamel had been right about the magical adjustment. As the day progressed, Harry became aware of subtle shifts in how his magic responded. Spells he'd always found challenging now came naturally, while others he'd excelled at required more concentration. It wasn't that he had lost or gained abilities, but rather that his natural affinities were revealing themselves without the soul fragment's influence. Most noticeably, his connection to Parseltongue remained intact but transformed. Where before it had always carried dark undertones, associations with Voldemort, with the Chamber of Secrets, with the snake that had attacked Mr. Weasley, now it felt neutral, simply another magical language he happened to understand. By evening, exhaustion had set in. The ritual had taken a significant magical toll, and Harry's body and magic needed time to recover and recalibrate. Back at the Leaky Cauldron, he retired early, falling into the deepest, most restful sleep he could remember. He dreamed of flying, not on a broomstick, but under his own power, soaring through clear skies with magic flowing effortlessly through him. Freedom, in its purest form. The next morning brought another change, one Harry hadn't anticipated. An elegant eagle owl arrived during breakfast, bearing a letter with a wax seal he didn't recognize. The letter was addressed simply, "To my cousin, Harry Potter," in flowing script. "Is that?" Hermione asked, recognizing the significance immediately. Harry nodded, breaking the seal with slightly unsteady hands. Inside was a single page of expensive parchment covered in the same elegant handwriting. "Dear cousin, your Gringotts notification arrived yesterday. I confess it came as a considerable shock to learn not only that my mother was adopted, but that she had a sister who was Lily Potter née Evans, and that consequently, you and I are first cousins. I have followed the reports of your trial with great interest. The magical violations you suffered are unconscionable, regardless of one's political affiliations. No wizard or witch should have their magic bound against their will, or knowledge. You should know that while my family name is indeed Burke, my immediate family holds views somewhat different from the traditional Burke stance. My father, Thaddeus Burke, was disowned for marrying my mother, Elizabeth, who was raised by Muggles, though we now know she had magical ancestry. I would be interested in meeting you, should you wish to know your maternal family better. I attend Beauxbatons rather than Hogwarts, as my parents relocated to France after my father's disownment. I will be in London this coming weekend, should you wish to arrange a meeting. Regardless of whether you choose to pursue this family connection, I wish you well in your recovery from the bindings and in claiming your rightful magical heritage. Your cousin, Anastasia Burke." Harry read the letter twice, emotions swirling. A cousin who wanted to meet him. Family who didn't hate magic or him. It seemed too good to be true. "She sounds nice," Ron offered after reading the letter. "Not what you'd expect from a Burke. Her father was disowned for marrying a Muggle-raised witch," Hermione pointed out. "That suggests they don't share the traditional pure-blood supremacist views." Harry nodded slowly. "I'm going to meet her. Even if it doesn't work out, I need to know my family, all of my family." He penned a reply immediately, suggesting a meeting that weekend at a private tea room in Diagon Alley that Nagnok had recommended as secure and discreet. With that matter set in motion, Harry turned his attention to his next major decision, his magical education. The summer was half over, and he needed to determine whether he would return to Hogwarts for his 5th year. "I don't think I can be under Dumbledore's authority again," he admitted to Ron and Hermione as they discussed options. "Even with the oversight committee watching him, I just don't trust him anymore." "But Hogwarts is the best magical school in Britain," Hermione argued, though with less conviction than she might have had before the trial revelations. "Is it?" Harry countered. "Or is that just what everyone says because they don't know any different? How many of us have ever seen another magical school in action? The Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students seem pretty well trained," Ron acknowledged. "And Bill says there are specialized magical academies that focus on specific branches of magic rather than general education." "That's true," Hermione agreed reluctantly. "There are advanced institutes for specific magical disciplines: arithmancy, ancient runes, magical healing, combat magic." Harry considered this. "Maybe that's what I need, something more specialized. With my magic unbound, trying to fit into standard Hogwarts classes might be frustrating anyway." "What about your OWLs?" Hermione asked, practical as always. "I can take them independently," Harry replied. "Nagnok mentioned that Gringotts offers certification testing for homeschooled magical students." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of yet another owl, this one bearing the official Hogwarts seal. The letter inside, however, wasn't from Dumbledore but from Professor McGonagall. "Dear Mr. Potter, in light of recent revelations and changes to your magical status, I am writing to discuss your educational options for the coming year. As your former head of house and a member of your guardianship committee, I feel it my duty to ensure you receive appropriate magical training suited to your current abilities and needs. While Hogwarts would welcome your return, I understand you may have reservations. If you would consider it, I would like to propose an alternative arrangement: independent study under specialized tutors, with quarterly assessment at Hogwarts to maintain your educational standing. This would allow you to develop your unique magical talents without the constraints of standard curriculum, while still preparing you for OWL and eventually NEWT examinations. I have taken the liberty of contacting several experts who would be willing to provide specialized instruction in areas where your natural talents may lie. These include masters in defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, and magical theory who owe no allegiance to Hogwarts or the current administration. Please consider this option and contact me at your convenience to discuss details. Whatever you decide, please know that I deeply regret my unwitting role in the binding placed upon you, and I am committed to supporting your magical development going forward. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. "That's actually a good compromise," Hermione said after reading the letter. "You'd get specialized training but still stay connected to Hogwarts. And McGonagall's all right," Ron added. "She seems genuinely sorry about that binding thing." Harry had to agree. Of all the adults implicated in the bindings, McGonagall's involvement had seemed the most peripheral and unwitting. Her binding had been limited to a specific academic area and designed to dissolve naturally as he progressed. "I think I'll accept," he decided. "At least for this year. I can always change course later if it's not working out." With that decision made, Harry felt another piece of his new life falling into place. The past week had been a whirlwind of revelations and transformations, but gradually a path forward was emerging, one of his own choosing, shaped by his true abilities and desires rather than others' manipulations. Later that afternoon, a final unexpected visitor arrived at the Leaky Cauldron, Neville Longbottom, looking nervous but determined. Harry welcomed him into the suite with genuine pleasure. Of all his Hogwarts classmates, Neville had always been kind and straightforward, if shy. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," Neville began hesitantly. "Gran brought me to London for some shopping, and I heard you were staying here." "It's good to see you, Neville," Harry assured him. "How's your summer been?" "Better since your trial, actually," Neville replied, surprising Harry. "When the news broke about your bindings, Gran insisted I get checked at Gringotts. Turns out I had 3 bindings on my magic, not as many as you, but enough to cause problems." "What?" Harry exclaimed, shocked. "Who put bindings on you?" My great-uncle Algy, mostly. Neville explained. After my parents were attacked, he worried my magic might be unstable from trauma. The goblins think he meant well, but the bindings went too far. One was specifically suppressing my connection to my father's wand, which is why I've always struggled with spellcasting. That's terrible, Hermione said, having joined them. Have they removed the bindings now? Neville nodded, a new confidence evident in his posture. 2 days ago. It's been amazing. My magic actually works properly now. Gran's been helping me practice, and I'm catching up on 4 years of spells I could never quite manage before. That's brilliant, Neville, Harry said sincerely. It's all because of you, Harry, Neville replied earnestly. If your case hadn't exposed the whole binding issue, I might never have known. Gran's furious about it. She's filed formal charges against Uncle Algy with the Ministry. Neville's visit brought home to Harry that his ordeal had already begun helping others. If even one other person had been freed from improper magical bindings because of his case, then the public exposure had been worth it. That evening, as Harry stood by the window watching the sunset over Diagon Alley, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just over a week. From a magically bound, manipulated pawn to a free wizard discovering his true potential. From an orphan with no magical family to someone with connections to ancient bloodlines and a living cousin eager to meet him. From a student struggling with magic to someone planning specialized magical training suited to his actual abilities. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Voldemort was still out there, likely furious about the destruction of his soul fragment. The wizarding world would continue to have expectations and demands. And Harry himself still had much to learn about who he truly was beneath all the layers of manipulation and circumstance. But for perhaps the first time in his life, Harry felt genuinely hopeful about his future. His magic was his own. His choices were his own. And whatever came next, he would face it as himself, the real Harry Potter, finally unbound. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The meeting with Anastasia Burke was set for Saturday at Florentine's Tea Room, a discreet establishment tucked away on a side street off Diagon Alley. Harry arrived early, his stomach tight with nervous anticipation. The private room Negnock had arranged featured a small table by a window overlooking a hidden magical garden, charmed for absolute privacy. Harry checked his appearance one last time in a small mirror. The changes since the binding's removal had stabilized somewhat, though he still occasionally caught himself staring at his reflection in surprise. He stood taller now, nearly 5 feet 10 inches where he'd barely reached 5 feet 6 inches before. His features had refined, the Potter genetics more prominent in his jawline and cheekbones. The famous scar had indeed begun to fade, now a thin silver line rather than an angry red lightning bolt. Most significantly, his eyes had changed. Still brilliantly green like his mother's, they now held a subtle luminescence when he used magic, a side effect of his unbound power that Negnock assured him would become less noticeable as his control improved. A gentle knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Harry straightened his dark green robes, selected with Hermione's help as appropriately formal without being stuffy, and took a deep breath. "Come in," he called, proud that his voice betrayed none of his anxiety. The young woman who entered moved with a graceful confidence that immediately reminded Harry of Fleur Delacour. Anastasia Burke was tall and slender, with chestnut hair that fell in loose waves to her shoulders. Her eyes, however, made Harry's breath catch. They were startlingly familiar. Not his mother's green, but a warm hazel that somehow echoed the smiling eyes in the few photos he had of Lily Evans. "Hello, cousin," she greeted him, her English perfect but with a slight French lilt. "I'm Anastasia, though my friends call me Anna." "Harry," he replied simply, extending his hand. It's really good to meet you." She took his hand, but instead of shaking it, she clasped it between both of hers. "Family shouldn't be so formal," she said with a warm smile. "In France, we would embrace. May I?" Harry nodded, slightly overwhelmed as she hugged him briefly but warmly. It felt strangely right, this connection to someone who shared his blood, who was part of the family he'd never known. They settled at the table as a house elf appeared silently to serve tea and delicate pastries. For a moment neither spoke, each studying the other with undisguised curiosity. "You have the Evans eyes," Anna said finally. "Though I'm told they were your mother's most distinctive feature." "And you have something of her too," Harry replied. "Something in your expression when you smile. I don't have many photos, but perhaps that can change," Anna said. "I brought something for you." She reached into an elegant handbag, withdrawing a small leather-bound album. "When your Gringotts letter arrived, my mother was shocked, as you can imagine. She had no idea she was adopted, much less that she had a sister. She immediately began researching her birth family." She passed the album to Harry, who opened it with careful hands. Inside were photographs he'd never seen before: a young woman who must have been his grandmother, holding a baby, two small girls playing in a garden, a teenager who was unmistakably his mother, standing beside another girl who must have been Anna's mother. "How?" Harry began, his voice catching. "Magical genealogy has methods for recovering lost family images," Anna explained. "Once the connection was confirmed, a specialist was able to locate and duplicate these from various archives and distant relatives' collections. They're copies, but magically perfect ones." Harry turned the pages slowly, drinking in these new glimpses of his family history. "This is, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." "I think perhaps I do," Anna said quietly. "Family is precious, especially when you've believed yourself without it." They spent the next hour getting to know each other, their initial awkwardness giving way to genuine connection. Anna told Harry about growing up in France after her father's estrangement from the Burke family, about attending Beauxbatons where she excelled in charms and ancient runes, and about her parents' work in international magical research. "Father specializes in cross-cultural magical theory," she explained. "Mother works with magical artifacts, authentication and restoration. They're currently in Egypt, which is why I came to London alone. They've written to you as well, by the way. The letter should arrive soon." In turn, Harry shared carefully edited versions of his life at Hogwarts and his summers with the Dursleys. He wasn't ready to reveal everything, but he did explain some of what the binding removals had meant for him. The trial reports mentioned 29 bindings, but didn't detail all of them, Anna said, her expression troubled. "Was it truly as extensive as they suggested?" Harry nodded grimly. "My magic was operating at maybe 25% of its natural capacity. My memories were blocked, my personality subtly altered, even my physical growth stunted. And I had no idea any of it was happening." Anna's hand clenched around her teacup. "It's barbaric. In France, such interference with a magical child would result in permanent loss of magical citizenship, at minimum. The consequences here have been complicated," Harry admitted. "Politically sensitive, given who was involved." "Dumbledore," Anna said, not bothering to hide her disgust. "His reputation internationally has always been more mixed than the British seem to believe. This scandal has simply confirmed what many suspected, that his benevolent facade hides a manipulative control seeker." The conversation shifted to Harry's plans, and he found himself openly sharing his educational decisions with Anna in a way he might not have with someone he just met. There was something about her that inspired trust, a directness combined with genuine interest that made him feel his opinions mattered. "Independent study with quarterly assessments sounds sensible," she agreed. "Though if you'd consider it, Beauxbatons would certainly welcome a transfer student of your caliber. Especially now that your true magical potential is emerging." "You think I could handle the language difference?" Harry asked, surprised by the suggestion. Anna waved this away. "Most instruction is multilingual now, with translation charms available for students. The international program has grown significantly in recent years." It was an intriguing possibility Harry hadn't considered. Getting completely away from Britain's politics and pressures had a certain appeal. "I'll think about it," he promised. "For now, I'm taking things one step at a time. Getting to know my magic again, figuring out who I am without all the interference." "A wise approach," Anna approved. And where are you staying now? I assume you're not returning to these Disley people? No, Harry confirmed. I'm looking at Potter properties. Apparently, I own several, though I've never been told about them before. The Goblins are preparing reports on their conditions and protective enchantments. Anna hesitated, then spoke carefully. If you'd like, my parents have a country home in the south of France that's sitting empty while they're in Egypt. It's under significant protective enchantments, and has been in Mother's family for generations. You would be welcome to use it while sorting out your affairs. The offer caught Harry off guard. That's incredibly generous, but we've only just met. Are you sure your parents would approve? They suggested it themselves in their last letter. Anna assured him. Family is family, Harry. And after what you've been through, having a safe, private place to recover seems like the least we can offer. The idea was tempting. A place far from British magical politics, where he could practice his expanding abilities without scrutiny or interruption. Where Daily Prophet reporters couldn't hound him for interviews about the trial's aftermath. I'd need to discuss it with my guardianship committee, Harry said finally, and make arrangements for my magical training. But yes, I think I'd like that very much. Anna smiled, and again Harry caught that flash of familiarity, something in the way her eyes crinkled at the corners that echoed his mother's expressions in the precious few photos he had. Then consider it settled, she said decisively. I return to France next week and can help you get established. The house recognizes Evan's blood, so the wards will accept you immediately. As their meeting drew to a close, Anna presented Harry with a small silver pendant in the shape of a lily. A portkey, she explained. Authorized by the French Ministry for Family Emergency Use. If you ever need immediate sanctuary, it will bring you directly to our family home in Paris. Just hold it and say sanctuary. Harry slipped the chain around his neck, touched by the gesture and the thought behind it, that he had family who cared for his safety, who wanted to protect him rather than use him. They parted with another warm embrace and promises to write frequently. Harry watched her leave, a strange mixture of emotions washing through him. Joy at finding family who genuinely wanted him. Grief for the years lost, the childhood he might have had if someone had bothered to tell him about his mother's family. And determination to build something new from these unexpected connections. The cousin he'd never known existed had just offered him something beyond price, not just a safe haven, but a branch of family untouched by the Wizarding War, by Dumbledore's manipulations, by the burdens of being Harry Potter in magical Britain. For the first time, Harry allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by prophecy or Voldemort or others' expectations. A future where he might simply be Harry, discovering his true magical potential and building connections that were genuine rather than engineered. It felt like freedom. The final session with Flamel to address the remaining magical aftereffects was scheduled for Monday morning. Harry arrived at the alchemist's laboratory with mixed emotions, eager to complete his magical liberation, yet apprehensive about what further changes might emerge. The Flamels greeted him warmly, their ancient faces creased with genuine smiles. In the week since the Horcrux removal, Harry had come to respect and trust the couple in a way he rarely did with adult wizards. They treated him not as the boy who lived or a curiosity, but simply as a young mage in need of guidance. Your magical aura has stabilized considerably, Perenelle observed, casting a diagnostic charm that revealed Harry's magic as a steady golden glow surrounding him. The pattern is more coherent now, with fewer dissonant elements. It feels more responsive, Harry agreed. Less like I'm forcing it through a filter and more like it's an extension of myself. Nicholas nodded approvingly. That's precisely how mature magic should feel. The remaining work today is twofold. First, to address any lingering damage to your magical pathways from the long-term bindings. Second, to help you establish healthy patterns for your magic's continued development. The process that followed was less dramatic than the Horcrux removal but no less profound. Harry lay within a complex diagram etched into the floor while the Flamels worked in concert, their wands moving in perfectly synchronized patterns as they chanted in an ancient language Harry didn't recognize. Unlike previous magical work on him, Harry remained fully conscious and active in this process. The flammels guided him through visualizing his magical core and pathways, teaching him to direct healing energy to areas where the bindings had left scars or constrictions. Magic has a remarkable capacity for self-healing, Nicholas explained during a brief rest period. But it needs direction, especially after such extensive interference. Think of it like physical therapy for your magical body. Will I need to continue this on my own? Harry asked. Daily meditative practice for at least 6 months, Perenelle confirmed. We've prepared instructions and memory crystals to guide you through the sequences. The second half of the session focused on what Nicholas called magical recalibration, helping Harry understand his natural affinities now that all external influences had been removed. Each magical being has inherent strengths and weaknesses, the alchemist explained. Areas where their magic naturally flows with greater ease or power. Before, your affinities were artificially shaped by the bindings. Now, we're discovering your true magical nature. A series of magical tests revealed patterns Harry found surprising. His strongest natural affinity was not for defense against the dark arts as he'd always believed, but for a branch of magic Nicholas called vital arts, a combination of healing, protective magic, and life force manipulation. This explains your remarkable survival capabilities, Perenelle noted. Your magic instinctively preserves and protects life, your own and others. His second strongest affinity was for elemental magic, particularly air and fire. When tested, Harry demonstrated an intuitive control over wind currents and flames that left even the ancient flammels looking impressed. Elemental affinities of this strength are rare, Nicholas commented as Harry effortlessly shaped a ball of fire between his palms, molding it into the form of a phoenix before extinguishing it with a thought. They typically manifest in family lines with creature heritage somewhere in their ancestry. Creature heritage? Harry repeated, surprised. Like Vila or something? Possibly, Perenelle said thoughtfully. The Potter line is ancient, and many old families have some non-human ancestry, though it's not often discussed in polite society these days. A comprehensive heritage test might reveal more. By the session's end, Harry had a much clearer understanding of his magical nature. Some abilities he'd taken for granted, like his skill with a broom, now made sense as manifestations of his elemental air affinity. Others he'd struggled with, like potions, were revealed to be areas where his magic naturally flowed less easily, requiring more structured focus to master. Remember, Nicholas cautioned as they concluded, affinities are not destiny. They represent paths of least resistance for your magic, not limits to what you can achieve. With proper training, you can excel in any magical discipline. Some will simply require different approaches than others. Harry left with a comprehensive plan for his continued magical development, crystalline-coded training sequences, and a new appreciation for the complexity of his own magic. For the first time, he felt truly equipped to understand and direct his magical education based on his actual needs and abilities, not what others thought he should learn. As he walked through Diagon Alley afterward, he became aware of subtle changes in how he perceived the magical environment around him. The shops and their enchanted products emitted distinctive magical signatures he could now discern. Passing witches and wizards left brief trails of their magical essence that his newly sensitive perception could detect. Most surprisingly, he found he could sense the intentions behind spells. When a shopkeeper used magic to arrange a display, Harry could feel the purposeful, constructive nature of the energy. When a suspicious-looking wizard in a side alley cast a furtive spell, the malicious undertones were immediately apparent, prompting Harry to alert a nearby magical law enforcement patrol. These new perceptive abilities would take time to fully understand and control, but they represented yet another aspect of his true magical nature emerging from behind the bindings that had suppressed it for so long. 3 days before his planned departure for France, Harry received an unexpected summons from the Wizengamot. The Goblin courier who delivered it explained that new evidence had emerged regarding the bindings case, requiring Harry's presence for what was being called a concluding assessment. Is this normal? Harry asked Nagnuk, who had accompanied him to the Leaky Cauldron to discuss final arrangements for his Potter properties. The Goblin's expression was grim. No. The standard trial proceedings were officially concluded. This additional session suggests significant new discoveries. Should I be worried? Harry pressed. Cautious, perhaps. Nagnok allowed. Our sources indicate this relates to financial aspects of the case that weren't fully addressed in the initial proceedings. Financial aspects? Harry hadn't given much thought to the monetary implications of the bindings. His focus had been on the magical and personal violations, not galleons and property. I'll attend, of course, he said finally. But I'd like you there as my advisor, if that's permitted. Not only permitted but advisable, Nagnok assured him. Gringotts has a vested interest in any financial malfeasance connected to your accounts. The session was scheduled for the following morning. Harry sent messages to Ron and Hermione, who both promised to attend for moral support. He also contacted Remus Lupin, who as a member of his guardianship committee should be present for any legal proceedings. That evening, unable to settle his mind, Harry found himself restlessly pacing his suite at the Leaky Cauldron. The initial shock and outrage of discovering the bindings had given way to a more focused determination to understand exactly what had been done to him, and why. If financial motivations had been part of it, he wanted those exposed just as thoroughly as the magical violations had been. A tap at his window revealed a nondescript brown owl bearing a letter sealed with the Hogwarts crest. Breaking the seal, Harry found a brief note from Professor McGonagall. Mr. Potter, I've been informed of tomorrow's special session. Be prepared for significant revelations regarding your family inheritance and financial guardianship. I believe you will find the information both disturbing and illuminating. I will be present in my capacity as a member of your guardianship committee. Please know that whatever emerges, you have allies who will ensure proper restitution. Respectfully, Minerva McGonagall. The cryptic warning did nothing to settle Harry's concerns. If anything, it heightened them. What exactly had been done with his family's money? He'd always known he had a trust vault, but beyond that, he'd never been given any information about the Potter estate or his inheritance. Sleep proved elusive that night. When Harry finally did drift off, his dreams were troubled, visions of keys and locked doors, of goblin gold flowing through unseen hands, of ledgers with entries that shifted and changed when he tried to read them. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding that even the bright July sunshine couldn't dispel. Harry dressed with particular care in formal robes that Bill Weasley had helped him select, deep blue with subtle silver embroidery that signified old family heritage without being ostentatious. Ron and Hermione met him in the Leaky Cauldron's private dining room, both looking concerned but supportive. "Whatever happens, we're with you," Hermione assured him over a breakfast Harry could barely touch. "Bill says there are rumors in Gringotts," Ron added, lowering his voice though they were alone. "Something about unauthorized access to family vaults and misdirected inheritances. He couldn't tell me details, goblin confidentiality oaths, but he said it's big." "Wonderful," Harry muttered. "Just what I needed, more discoveries about how my life's been manipulated." They were joined by Remus Lupin, looking better than Harry had seen him in some time. The werewolf had taken Harry's suggestion and undergone his own examination at Gringotts, discovering subtle compulsion charms that had been influencing his behavior for years. Their removal had led to improved health and a new clarity of purpose that showed in his more confident bearing. "Ready for this?" Lupin asked quietly as they prepared to depart. Harry squared his shoulders. "As ready as I can be. Let's get it over with." They traveled to the ministry by secure flow connection, emerging into the atrium where they were met by Amelia Bones herself. The head of the Diemeli looked unusually somber, her monocle glinting in the magical light. "Mr. Potter," she greeted him formally. "The session will be held in Courtroom 1. Given the sensitive nature of today's proceedings, access has been restricted to essential participants and your approved support persons." "That sounds serious," Harry observed as they followed her toward the elevators. "It is," Bones confirmed grimly. "What we've uncovered goes beyond the magical violations addressed in the initial trial. There are financial and inheritance irregularities that constitute criminal behavior under both wizarding and goblin law. Courtroom 1 was smaller than the grand chamber where the original trial had taken place, but no less imposing. Dark wood paneling and elevated seating created an atmosphere of grave formality. Unlike standard Gringotts sessions, today's gathering was limited to the most senior members, along with representatives from Gringotts and the Department of Magical Inheritance. Harry took his place in the witness area, with Ron, Hermione, and Lupin seated behind him. Nagnok joined him at the respondents' table, spreading out several folders of parchment with goblin efficiency. At precisely 9 o'clock, Augusta Longbottom called the session to order. Her imperious voice carried effortlessly through the chamber without magical amplification. This special session of the Wizengamot is convened to address newly discovered financial implications of case number JM 1995-07, regarding illegal magical bindings placed upon Harry James Potter. Madam Bones will present the findings of the Joint Ministry Gringotts investigation. Amelia Bones took the floor, her expression severe. Following the trial regarding magical bindings placed on Mr. Potter, routine audits were conducted of all accounts connected to his guardianship and inheritance. These audits revealed discrepancies that prompted a more thorough investigation. She gestured, and a magical projection appeared in the center of the courtroom, a complex diagram showing various vaults, properties, and financial flows. The Potter estate, at the time of James and Lily Potter's deaths, consisted of the following: the family vault containing approximately 2 million galleons in liquid assets, investment portfolios worth an estimated 4 million galleons, 7 properties including Potter Manor, a London townhouse, and holdings in Godric's Hollow, Hogsmeade, and abroad, and various family heirlooms and magical artifacts valued at approximately 3 million galleons. Harry stared at the projection in shock. He'd known his parents left him something, but this was a fortune. And he'd never been told about any of it beyond his trust vault. Additionally, Bones continued, Mr. Potter was named beneficiary of the Black family entailed estate through his grandmother Doria Black Potter, to be accessed upon his majority, or in the event that the current holder, Sirius Black, designated him heir apparent. Murmurs spread through the courtroom at this revelation. The Black fortune was one of the largest in Wizarding Britain. Upon the deaths of James and Lily Potter, control of these assets should have passed to Mr. Potter's magical guardian, with management oversight by Gringotts and the Department of Magical Inheritance. Annual accounting should have been filed with both entities. Bones's expression darkened. Our investigation has revealed that no such accounting was ever filed. Furthermore, Mr. Potter was never informed of the full extent of his inheritance, was denied access to family properties that should have been available to him, and was not consulted on investment decisions affecting his estate. Who was responsible for this oversight? Madame Longbottom demanded from the chief's chair. Albus Dumbledore, Bones stated flatly. After securing himself as Mr. Potter's magical guardian, through means now determined to have involved unauthorized memory charms on several Wizengamot members who might have objected, Dumbledore gained control of the Potter estate. The record of that guardianship assignment was magically obscured until the removal of certain bindings triggered Gringotts' ancestral protections. Harry felt a cold anger building inside him. Dumbledore hadn't just bound his magic and memories, he'd hidden Harry's entire inheritance from him. Kept him ignorant of his true financial status and family properties, including, apparently, a manor house that could have been his home instead of the Dursleys' cupboard under the stairs. The financial improprieties fall into 3 categories. Bones continued. First, unauthorized withdrawals from the Potter family vault totaling approximately 750,000 galleons over 13 years. The projection shifted to show a series of transactions, each bearing Dumbledore's magical signature. Second, the diversion of income from Potter investments to various organizations and individuals. And third, the failure to maintain and secure Potter properties, several of which have fallen into disrepair due to neglect. What happened to the withdrawn funds? Lupin asked from behind Harry, his voice tight with controlled anger. Bones nodded to a goblin Harry didn't recognize, who stepped forward with a detailed ledger. Account Auditor Ironclaw will address the specifics, she said. The goblin cleared his throat. Our forensic accounting has traced the majority of unauthorized withdrawals to 3 destinations. Approximately 300,000 galleons were transferred to accounts connected to the Order of the Phoenix, an unregistered organization founded and led by Albus Dumbledore. Harry had heard of the Order from Sirius, a secret group that fought against Voldemort during the First War. Using Harry's inheritance to fund it without his knowledge or consent was a profound breach of trust. A further 200,000 galleons were diverted to Hogwarts accounts designated for special security measures. These funds were used primarily for wards and monitoring systems specifically focused on Mr. Potter rather than general school security. So Dumbledore had used Harry's own money to help keep him prisoner and under surveillance. The irony was bitter. The remaining diverted funds were distributed among various individuals in the form of stipends or payments for services related to Mr. Potter. These include monthly payments to Petunia and Vernon Dursley beginning in November 1981 and continuing to the present. The Dursleys were being paid. Harry exclaimed, unable to contain himself. They always claimed I was a financial burden, that they took me in out of the goodness of their hearts despite the cost. Yes, Mr. Potter, Ironclaw confirmed dispassionately. Monthly deposits of 500 galleons, converted to Muggle currency, have been transferred to their bank account for your maintenance and care. Harry felt physically ill. The Dursleys had received what amounted to a generous salary for housing him, all while claiming he was an unwanted expense, dressing him in Dudley's cast-offs, and feeding him the bare minimum. Additionally, the Goblin continued, stipends were paid to Arabella Figg for monitoring services, to various Order members for guard duty rotations, and to Molly Weasley for what was designated as integration support and guidance. Ron made a choke sound behind Harry. Learning that his mother had been paid to befriend Harry, on top of her involvement in the loyalty compulsions, would be devastating. Mrs. Weasley was being paid to be nice to me? Harry asked, his voice hollow. The documentation describes the payments as compensation for helping the Potter heir adjust to Wizarding society and providing maternal guidance. Ironclaw clarified, showing no emotion at the human drama unfolding. Whether she viewed this as payment for services or legitimate support expenses is not clear from the financial records alone. Harry wasn't sure which interpretation would be worse. Either way, what he had treasured as genuine kindness now seemed tainted by financial transactions he'd known nothing about. The revelations continued, each more disturbing than the last. Properties that should have been maintained in trust for Harry had been neglected or, in some cases, used for Order activities without proper documentation. Heirlooms had been removed from vaults for safekeeping and never returned. Investment decisions had been made that benefited Dumbledore's allies rather than maximizing returns for the estate. The total financial impact of these improprieties is estimated at approximately 1.3 million galleons, Ironclaw concluded. This includes direct withdrawals, diverted income, depreciated property values due to neglect, and lost investment opportunities. The courtroom was silent as the magnitude of the theft, for that's what it was, sank in. Dumbledore had systematically plundered Harry's inheritance while keeping him ignorant of its very existence. "Where is Dumbledore now?" Harry asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. "Shouldn't he be here to answer for this?" "Albus Dumbledore was summoned to appear," Madame Longbottom replied. "He has not responded to the summons and appears to have left Britain approximately 24 hours ago. He'd fled." The great Albus Dumbledore, faced with the exposure of his financial crimes, had run away rather than face justice. "We have notified the International Confederation of Wizards," Madame Bones added. "His magical passport has been flagged, and international arrest warrants are being processed. However, given his extensive international connections and magical abilities, apprehension may be challenging." The session continued with discussions of restitution and recovery. Gringotts had already frozen all accounts connected to Dumbledore and begun the process of recovering misappropriated funds. Properties would be assessed and restored. A full inventory of family heirlooms would be conducted to identify missing items. Mr. Potter, Madame Longbottom addressed him directly. As a victim of these financial crimes, you have the right to press additional charges beyond those the Ministry will pursue automatically. Do you wish to do so? Harry considered the question carefully. More charges meant more publicity, more proceedings, more time spent dwelling on Dumbledore's betrayal rather than moving forward with his life. I want everything that was taken from me returned, he said finally. I want my family's properties restored and protected. But beyond that, I'm more interested in preventing this from happening to anyone else than in punishing Dumbledore specifically. Nagnock nodded approvingly beside him. It was a mature response, one focused on justice and prevention rather than vengeance. A reasonable position, Madame Longbottom acknowledged. The Wizengamot will ensure that guardianship laws are reviewed and strengthened to prevent similar abuses in future. As the session moved toward its conclusion, one final revelation emerged, perhaps the most personally painful for Harry. There is one additional matter, Ironclaw stated, consulting a final parchment. Among the documents recovered from Dumbledore's personal vault was a sealed letter from Lily and James Potter, intended to be delivered to Mr. Potter on his 11th birthday. It was never delivered. Harry's heart seemed to stop. A letter from his parents? Something they had written specifically for him, that Dumbledore had kept hidden. We have verified its authenticity, the Goblin continued, producing a slightly yellowed envelope. The magical signatures match those of Lily and James Potter, and integrity spells confirm it has not been tampered with since sealing. The letter was passed to Madame Bones, who examined it briefly before approaching Harry. This rightfully belongs to you, Mr. Potter, she said gently, placing it in his hands. Harry stared at the envelope, at the handwriting that must be his mother's or father's, neat, flowing script that spelled out, "For Harry on his 11th birthday," on the front. Inside was perhaps the only direct message his parents had ever left specifically for him, words they'd written with him in mind, and Dumbledore had denied him even this small connection to them. His hands shook slightly as he carefully broke the seal and withdrew several sheets of parchment covered in two different handwriting styles, one bold and slightly messy, the other delicate and precise. The courtroom faded from his awareness as he began to read, "Our dearest Harry, happy 11th birthday, son! If you're reading this, then you're about to begin your journey at Hogwarts, and we couldn't be prouder. We hope these years have been filled with love and happiness, and that whoever has been raising you has told you all about us and the magical world you were born into. We're writing this letter as a precaution. These are dangerous times, and while we hope to see you grow up ourselves, we want to make sure you have guidance from us if the worst should happen." Harry swallowed hard, blinking back tears. His parents had wanted to make sure he knew they loved him, even if they couldn't be there. And Dumbledore had kept even this from him. First, some practical matters. By now, your guardian should have explained about your inheritance and the Potter family history. The family vault contains more than just gold. There are journals and family grimoires that will help you understand your magical heritage. The Potter family magic has certain unique characteristics, particularly in defensive and healing magic, that you may begin to manifest as you grow older. Your guardian should also have introduced you to your godfather, Sirius Black, who we trust completely with your safety and happiness. If for any reason Sirius has been unable to raise you, you should have been placed with one of the following: Remus Lupin, Alice and Frank Longbottom, or your mother's cousin Elizabeth Burke, who though estranged from the main Burke family shares your mother's values and warmth. Harry's head snapped up at this last name. Elizabeth Burke, Anna's mother. His parents had specifically named her as a potential guardian. Yet he'd been sent to Petunia Dursley instead, while being magically prevented from discovering this other branch of his mother's family. Now for the more personal part. Harry, we want you to know how deeply you are loved. From the moment you were born, you have been the center of our world. Your father embarrasses himself daily making ridiculous faces just to see you smile. Your mother sings you to sleep each night with songs from both the magical and muggle worlds. We have such hopes for the person you'll become. Not for greatness or fame or any of those external things that matter so little in the end. We hope you'll be kind. We hope you'll be brave enough to stand up for what's right. We hope you'll find friends who love you for exactly who you are, and one day, someone special to build a life with as we have found in each other. The letter continued with personal anecdotes, advice for Hogwarts, and gentle guidance about navigating the magical world. His father wrote about Quidditch and pranks, but also about integrity and standing by friends. His mother shared thoughts on magical theory, reminded him not to neglect his non-magical studies, and emphasized the importance of finding joy in everyday moments. It was everything first-year Harry had needed: practical information, emotional connection, and the certainty that he had been loved, truly and deeply loved, by parents who had wanted the best for him. By the time he finished reading, tears streamed freely down his face. He made no attempt to hide them. This loss, this deliberate theft of his parents' words and guidance when he needed them most, felt more personal somehow than even the magical bindings. "Mr. Potter." Madame Longbottom's voice was gentle, unusual for the stern witch. "Would you like a brief recess to compose yourself?" Harry shook his head, carefully folding the letter and placing it in an inner pocket close to his heart. "No. I'd rather finish this now." The final portions of the session passed in something of a blur for Harry. Financial guardianship of his estate was formally transferred to a trust committee consisting of Nagnock, Madame Bones, and Remus Lupin until Harry reached his majority. The recovery process for misappropriated funds was outlined. Security measures for Potter properties were established. When at last they were dismissed, Harry remained seated, feeling oddly hollow despite the weight of all he'd learned. "Harry?" Hermione touched his shoulder gently. "Are you all right?" He looked up at his friends, seeing the concern in their faces. "I will be. It's just a lot." Ron looked particularly troubled, no doubt thinking about his mother's involvement. "Harry, about my mom, not now," Harry interrupted, not unkindly. "I need time to process all this. We'll talk about it later, I promise." As they left the courtroom, Harry was approached by Madame Bones. "Mr. Potter, there's one more thing you should know. Albus Dumbledore left something for you, a letter and a memory vial. They were delivered to my office this morning by Fawkes." She handed him a small package wrapped in purple velvet. "It's been checked for any harmful magic. Whatever his other crimes, I don't believe he intended you physical harm." Harry accepted the package with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to destroy it unopened. What could Dumbledore possibly say to justify his actions? But another part, the part that had always sought answers, knew he would eventually need to hear whatever explanation the old wizard offered. "Thank you," he said simply, tucking the package away. He would deal with it later, when the anger wasn't quite so raw. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity, as Harry prepared for his departure to France. The Potter properties were being assessed and secured, with plans to begin restoration work on Potter Manor immediately. His financial affairs were being untangled from Dumbledore's web of misdirection, with recovered funds already being returned to the appropriate vaults. Through it all, Harry maintained a focused determination. The revelations about Dumbledore's financial manipulations had been infuriating but also oddly liberating. With each exposed deception, another link in the chain binding Harry to the old wizard's vision for his life was broken. The morning of his scheduled departure, Harry finally felt ready to face Dumbledore's final message. Seated in his suite at the Leaky Cauldron, with Ron and Hermione there for support, he unwrapped the purple velvet package. Inside was a small crystal vial containing swirling silver memories and a sealed letter bearing Dumbledore's familiar handwriting. Harry opened the letter first, its parchment heavy and expensive as always. "Dear Harry, by the time you read this, I will have left Britain. Not from cowardice, though I understand it may appear so, but because my continued presence would only further complicate the process of restoring what was wrongfully taken from you. There is no justification for my actions regarding your inheritance. What began as temporary measures during a dangerous time gradually became habitual overreach. The Order needed funding, Hogwarts needed security, and the Potter vaults offered ready resources. Each withdrawal was rationalized as necessary for the greater good, your protection, the fight against Voldemort, the security of the wizarding world. But good intentions do not excuse theft, nor does necessity justify deception. I should have informed you of your full inheritance when you reached Hogwarts. I should have established proper accounting and transparency. I did neither, and for that, there can be no adequate apology. The memory vial contains something I believe you deserve to see. The night I made the decision to place you with the Dursleys rather than following your parents' wishes regarding guardianship. It does not exonerate me, but it may help you understand the context of that choice, which has shaped your life so profoundly. I hope someday you might find it in yourself not to forgive me, as I do not deserve forgiveness, but to understand that I truly believed I was acting to protect you and prepare you for the burden prophecy placed upon you. I was wrong in my methods, even if my concern for your survival was genuine. The bindings were a mistake born of fear of what untrained power might do to a child, fear of Voldemort's influence through the Horcrux connection, fear that you might not develop the specific strengths I believed necessary for your eventual confrontation with him. I should have trusted in your inherent nature and guided rather than controlled. You are free now, Harry. Free of my manipulations, free of the Horcrux, increasingly free of the prophecy's shadow. Use that freedom well. With regret and hope, Albus Dumbledore. Harry set the letter down, his expression unreadable. It was, in its way, the most honest communication Dumbledore had ever had with him, acknowledging wrongdoing directly rather than wrapping it in riddles and half-truths. But it came far too late to repair the damage done. Are you going to view the memory? Hermione asked quietly. Harry nodded. I need to see it. To understand, like he said. They had arranged to borrow a pensieve from Gringotts for this purpose. The stone basin sat on the table, ancient runes carved around its rim glowing faintly in the room's dimness. Do you want us to come with you? Ron offered. Harry considered this. Yes. Whatever this shows, I'd rather not face it alone. He uncorked the vial and poured the silvery contents into the pensieve, watching as they swirled and settled. Taking a deep breath, he placed his finger to the surface, feeling the familiar pulling sensation as he was drawn into Dumbledore's memory. Ron and Hermione followed, their fingers touching the silver substance just after his. They found themselves in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, though it looked slightly different from how Harry remembered it. The night sky was visible through the windows, and a younger Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his auburn-streaked beard and hair less silver than in Harry's time. Opposite him sat Minerva McGonagall, looking decades younger but just as stern, and beside her, a haggard Remus Lupin who appeared to have aged years and days, his face gaunt with grief. The wills were quite clear, Albus, McGonagall was saying, her Scottish accent more pronounced in her distress. Harry was to go to Sirius Black. With Black now unavailable, the secondary guardians are listed as the Longbottoms, Remus, or Lily's cousin Elizabeth. The Longbottoms are no longer an option, Dumbledore said gravely. They were attacked last night. They survive, but in a condition that makes guardianship impossible. Lupin made a choke sound. Frank and Alice too? Merlin, will it never end? The war is supposed to be over. Death Eaters seeking revenge, Dumbledore confirmed. Which brings us to our dilemma. Harry Potter requires a guardian who can protect him from similar retribution. I could take him, Lupin said desperately. James and Lily wanted me to. Your condition makes that legally impossible, Remus, Dumbledore interrupted gently. The Ministry would never approve werewolf guardianship of any child, let alone one of Harry's significance. Then Elizabeth Burke, McGonagall pressed. Lily's cousin? She's married to Thaddeus Burke, yes, but they've publicly distanced themselves from the family's darker associations. They have a daughter just a year older than Harry. It would be a proper wizarding home. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. I've considered this option carefully. The Burke connection presents two problems. First, despite their moderate stance, they remain connected to a family with historical Death Eater ties. This places them at risk of both attack and infiltration. That could be addressed with proper wards and secrecy, McGonagall countered. Perhaps. But there is a second, more significant concern. Dumbledore rose and approached a complex silver instrument on a nearby table. My analysis of Harry's survival reveals something unprecedented. Lily Potter created a blood protection through her sacrifice, ancient magic of the most powerful kind. This protection remains active in Harry's veins and can be sustained through residence with a blood relative. Elizabeth is related to Lily, Lupin pointed out. A cousin is too distant for the protection to anchor, Dumbledore explained. It requires closer consanguinity. A sister would be ideal. Fortunately, Lily has one. Petunia? McGonagall looked horrified. Albus, you cannot be serious. I observe that family all day. They're the worst sort of muggles, rigid, unimaginative, and actively hostile to magic. Yet they are family, Dumbledore insisted. And their very ordinariness provides a certain protection. No one in the wizarding world would think to look for the boy who lived in a muggle suburb. The blood wards, combined with their anonymity, will keep Harry safer than any magical household could. At what cost? Lupin demanded. James and Lily didn't want that for their son. They specifically listed alternatives. They could not have anticipated the blood protection Lily created. Dumbledore cut in. Nor the continued threat Death Eaters would pose after Voldemort's defeat. So you'll ignore their wishes for Harry's upbringing based on your assessment of his security needs? McGonagall's voice was cold. For now, Dumbledore said firmly. Until the immediate danger passes. In a few years, when the remaining Death Eaters have been captured and the political situation stabilizes, we can reconsider more appropriate magical guardianship. The memory shifted, jumping forward in time. The same office, but now snow fell outside the windows. Dumbledore sat alone, examining what appeared to be monitoring devices connected to Harry. A small silver instrument emitted puffs of smoke that formed into the shape of a sleeping child, then a house, then a dome of protective energy surrounding both. Still secure, Dumbledore murmured. Though the boy shows concerning signs of accidental magic. Stronger than anticipated for his age. Another shift, another jump in time. Now Dumbledore stood with a grim-faced wizard Harry didn't recognize. The Burke family has relocated to France, the unknown wizard reported. They've made inquiries about Lily Potter's son through unofficial channels. They must not find him, Dumbledore said firmly. The blood protection is our strongest defense, and any contact with the magical world risks exposure. What shall I tell them? Nothing. The official position remains that Harry Potter's location is classified for his protection. If they persist, implement the measures we discussed to discourage further investigation. The memory shifted one final time. Dumbledore now appeared much as Harry had first known him, suggesting this scene occurred shortly before Harry's arrival at Hogwarts. The headmaster stood examining the same monitoring devices, which now showed signs of strain, the smoke patterns fractured and unstable. The protection weakens, he murmured to Fawkes, who watched from his perch. The boy's magic grows stronger, fighting against the constraints of the Muggle environment. Soon he must be brought into our world, guided carefully along the necessary path. Dumbledore moved to a cabinet and withdrew a small box. Opening it revealed several crystal vials containing what appeared to be prepared spells or enchantments. The first bindings were necessary for his protection, he told the Phoenix. These additional measures will ensure he develops the specific strengths needed to face what lies ahead. Courage over caution. Loyalty to the light. Resilience through adversity. He closed the box with a sigh. The greater good demands difficult choices, old friend. History will judge whether mine were correct. The memory ended, and Harry found himself back in his suite at the Leaky Cauldron, Ron and Hermione returning alongside him. For a long moment, none of them spoke. He really believed he was protecting you, Hermione said finally, her voice subdued. By systematically cutting me off from everyone my parents wanted in my life. Harry replied, his tone more tired than angry. By deciding that his assessment of my security needs outweighed everything else, my happiness, my development, my parents' explicit wishes. And he never reversed it, Ron pointed out. He said it was temporary until things stabilized, but years later, he was still keeping you isolated, still planning more bindings. Harry nodded slowly. That's the pattern, isn't it? Temporary measures that became permanent. Emergency decisions that were never revisited. All justified by a greater good that conveniently aligned with his own vision of how things should be. He rose and moved to the window, looking out at Diagon Alley below. Witches and wizards moved about their business, unaware of the revelations unfolding in the room above them. The worst part is, Harry said softly, I understand his reasoning. Given what he believed about the blood protection, about the continuing Death Eater threat, even about the prophecy. I can see how each individual decision seemed justifiable to him. Understanding doesn't make it right, Hermione said firmly. No, it doesn't. Harry turned back to his friends. But it helps me put it in perspective. Dumbledore wasn't a cartoon villain twirling his mustache and plotting to control me for the fun of it. He was a flawed, arrogant man who believed his judgment should override everyone else's, including my parents, including mine. So what now? Ron asked. Does this change anything about? Well, about France and everything? Harry shook his head. If anything, it makes me more certain. I need space away from all this, from Britain's magical politics, from Dumbledore's long shadow, from being the boy who lived. I need time to figure out who I am without all those influences. We'll write all the time, Hermione promised, eyes bright with unshed tears. And visit when we can. Yeah, Ron agreed. And if you hate it, you can always come back. Mum. He stopped, wincing slightly at the mention of his mother, whose role in Harry's life now seemed so complicated. Ron, Harry said gently, we need to talk about your mum. Ron looked miserable. I don't know what to say. Finding out she was taking money, on top of that loyalty compulsion thing. I want to believe she thought she was just helping you, not being paid to pretend to care. I do too, Harry said honestly. And I don't blame you for any of it. You've been a true friend, Ron, that's never been in doubt. Some of the tension eased from Ron's shoulders. I've asked Bill to look into exactly what those payments were for. If she was just accepting reimbursement for feeding you and buying you Christmas presents and stuff, that's one thing. If it was... He couldn't finish the sentence. Either way, we'll deal with it, Harry assured him. Our friendship is between us, not our families. They spent the rest of the evening finalizing plans for Harry's departure. The portkey to the Burke family home in southern France was scheduled for activation at 10 the following morning. Anna would meet him there to help him get settled before returning to her parents in Egypt. As darkness fell over London, Harry found himself growing thoughtful. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one without bindings, without Dumbledore's manipulations, without the crushing weight of others' expectations. There's one more thing I need to do before I leave, he said suddenly. What's that? Hermione asked. Harry smiled, a genuine smile that lit his eyes in a way his friends had rarely seen. I need to fly. Not on a broom, with my own magic. The elemental affinity Flammel identified. I've been practicing the techniques, and I think I'm ready. Fly? Without a broom? Ron looked equal parts amazed and concerned. Is that even possible? Theoretically, Hermione said slowly. Elemental air magic could potentially allow for controlled levitation and movement, but it's incredibly advanced. Most wizards who've mastered it spent decades. Most wizards had their magic bound and restricted. Harry pointed out. Mine is finally free. And this feels right. Like something I was always meant to do. They made their way to the roof of the Leaky Cauldron, a flat space normally used for all deliveries. The night was clear, stars visible despite London's lights, a gentle breeze stirring the summer air. Harry moved to the center of the roof, closing his eyes to center himself as Flammel had taught him. He focused on his magical core, feeling the energy that now flowed freely through him, no longer constrained by artificial limitations. Air is not about dominating the element, he murmured, recalling Flammel's instruction. It's about becoming part of it, letting your magic harmonize with the natural flow. He extended his awareness outward, feeling the currents of air around him, the gentle updrafts from the warm building below, the cooler streams flowing from above, the complex patterns created by buildings and trees in the distance. Slowly, he allowed his magic to merge with these currents, not forcing or commanding but blending, suggesting, becoming part of the natural flow. He felt his body lighten, the pull of gravity lessening as air magic supported him. With deliberate intent, Harry pushed gently upward with his magic. His feet left the roof, his body rising smoothly into the night air. He opened his eyes, finding himself hovering several feet above the rooftop, surrounded by a faint shimmer that was his magic interacting with the air around him. "Bloody hell!" Ron whispered, awestruck. Harry laughed, a sound of pure joy. This felt right in a way nothing magical ever had before, as natural as breathing. He extended his arms and willed himself forward, gliding across the rooftop, then higher, ascending above the chimney stacks. The sensation was nothing like broom flight. There was no vibration, no feeling of sitting on something external. It was as if the air itself had become an extension of his body, responding to his thoughts as readily as his own limbs. He soared higher, careful to stay within the building's magical concealment wards. Beneath him, Ron and Hermione watched, their faces upturned in wonder. He executed a graceful turn, then a loop, each movement becoming more intuitive as he surrendered to the element's natural patterns. For nearly an hour, Harry explored this new ability, testing its limits and discovering its nuances. He could move at considerable speed when he aligned with natural wind currents, or hover with perfect stillness when he created a balanced cushion of air. He could descend rapidly by releasing his magical hold, then catch himself with a gentle updraft. When he finally returned to the rooftop, touching down lightly beside his friends, he was breathless not from exertion but from exhilaration. That was... Hermione seemed at a loss for words, a rare occurrence. "Beautiful," Ron supplied. "Like you were born to it." "Maybe I was," Harry said thoughtfully. "Maybe this is part of what my magic was always meant to do, before the bindings shaped it differently." They returned to Harry's suite, the night growing late. As they said their goodbyes, Ron and Hermione would see him off in the morning, but this felt like the real farewell. Harry reflected on how far they'd come together. "I wouldn't have survived any of this without you two," he said earnestly. "The bindings, the trial, Dumbledore's manipulations, having you stand by me through it all has meant everything." Hermione hugged him fiercely. "We'll always be there for you, Harry. Distance won't change that." "Yeah," Ron agreed, clapping him on the shoulder. "And France isn't that far, really. We'll visit so often you'll get sick of us." After they left, Harry spent his final night in Britain packing the last of his belongings and writing several important letters to be delivered after his departure. One to Sirius, explaining everything that had happened and his decision to leave temporarily. One to Neville, thanking him for his support and encouraging his continued magical development now that his own bindings were removed. And one to the Weasley family collectively, expressing his appreciation for their kindness over the years, regardless of its complicated origins. The last letter was the most difficult, addressed to Dumbledore, wherever he might be. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs that had taken Harry hours to compose. "Professor Dumbledore, I've viewed your memory and read your letter. I understand now why you made the choices you did, even if I cannot agree with them. You shaped my life according to your vision of what I needed to be. You decided what I should know, what powers I should have, even who I should trust and love. You convinced yourself it was necessary, for my protection, for the greater good, for the eventual defeat of Voldemort. But in doing so, you denied me the most fundamental right of any person, the right to become myself. To discover my own strengths and weaknesses. To make my own choices, even my own mistakes. I don't hate you for it. Hatred would give your influence over me too much continued power. Instead, I'm choosing to move forward and discover who I truly am without your bindings, without your guidance, without the path you tried to set for me. I hope you find peace with your choices. I am finding mine by making my own at last. Harry Potter morning arrived with clear skies and gentle sunshine, a perfect day for new beginnings. Harry completed his final preparations, shrinking his trunk and securing it in his pocket. The International Portkey Office had approved his travel documents with remarkable speed once Madame Bones intervened, citing his special security circumstances. Ron and Hermione arrived to accompany him to the Ministry's International Transportation Department, along with Remus Lupin and, somewhat surprisingly, Neville Longbottom, who had asked to see Harry off. I wanted to thank you in person, Neville explained as they walked. What happened with your bindings led to mine being discovered. My magic has improved so much already, it's like I'm finally the wizard I was supposed to be all along. Harry smiled, genuinely happy for his friend. That's brilliant, Neville. I always knew you had it in you. Grands arranged special tutoring for the rest of summer. Neville continued, a new confidence evident in his posture and speech. And she's taking me to get a proper wand tomorrow, one chosen for me, not my father's. The conversation continued as they made their way through the ministry's ornate atrium toward the international travel offices. Harry noticed people staring as they passed, whispering behind their hands. The Daily Prophet had been running daily stories about the Potter binding scandal, and Dumbledore's subsequent flight from justice, making Harry even more grateful to be leaving the spotlight behind. At the International Portkey office, they were met by Anna, who had arrived early to ensure everything was properly arranged. She greeted Harry warmly, then extended that same warmth to his friends. I've heard so much about you both, she told Ron and Hermione. Harry will be in good hands, I promise. And you're welcome to visit whenever you like. The final preparations were completed quickly. Harry's portkey, a small silver compass, was activated and registered for the specific coordinates of the Burke family estate in Provence. His magical passport was stamped with the appropriate visas and permissions. As the departure time approached, Harry found himself overcome with unexpected emotion. For all that he was eager for this new beginning, leaving behind the first real home and friends he'd ever known was difficult. I'm not disappearing forever, he assured them all. Just taking some time to figure things out. To become whoever I'm really meant to be. That's all any of us want for you, Harry, Lupin said softly. The chance to discover yourself without anyone else's expectations shaping you. The final goodbyes were emotional but not sad. There was a sense of possibility in the air, of new chapters beginning rather than old ones ending. Hugs were exchanged, final words of advice and encouragement offered. 30 seconds to activation. The portkey official announced. Harry took his position in the designated area, compass held firmly in his hand. He took one last look at the friends who had stood by him through everything, Ron tall and steadfast, Hermione with tears in her eyes but a proud smile on her face, Neville with his newfound confidence, Lupin watching with the fond expression of someone who had finally found his proper place in Harry's life. 10 seconds. Right as soon as you're settled, Hermione called. And don't forget to tell us about the French food, Ron added with a grin. 3, 2, 1, activation. Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as the portkey engaged. The ministry disappeared in a swirl of color and sensation. Unlike normal portkeys, international travel took longer, nearly 30 seconds of disorienting movement before his feet touched solid ground again. He stumbled slightly as he landed, then caught his balance and looked around, taking in his first view of his temporary new home. The Burke estate was nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills covered in vineyards and lavender fields. The house itself was a rambling stone structure with blue shutters and climbing roses, less imposing than a manor but larger and more elegant than a cottage. Anna steadied him with a hand on his arm. Welcome to Rosemond, she said warmly. Named for the wild roses that grow all over the property. It's been in my mother's adoptive family for generations. It's beautiful, Harry said sincerely. After the confines of Privet Drive and the institutional grandeur of Hogwarts, the country estate felt like something from a dream, open, natural, and welcoming. They walked up the stone path to the house, passing gardens bursting with summer flowers and herbs. Harry could feel the protective enchantments as they crossed the boundary, powerful but not oppressive, woven into the natural environment rather than imposed upon it. Inside, the house was a blend of wizard and muggle influences, magical photographs alongside impressionist paintings, enchanted household items next to antique furniture. It felt lived in and loved, not a museum-like showcase of wealth but a genuine family home. "You'll stay in the East Wing," Anna explained, leading him through the house. "It has its own study and practice room for your magical training, plus a private garden if you want outdoor space." She showed him to a spacious suite of rooms with large windows overlooking lavender fields. The bedroom was airy and comfortable, decorated in soothing blues and creams. The adjoining study contained empty bookshelves waiting to be filled and a large desk positioned to catch the morning light. "This is more than I expected," Harry admitted, overcome by the generosity of this family he'd only just discovered. "Mother insisted you have proper space to settle in," Anna said with a smile. "The practice room is through here. It's warded for advanced magical work, so you needn't worry about accidentally damaging anything." The practice room was particularly impressive, a circular space with reinforced walls, specialized targets for spell work, and equipment for various magical disciplines. One section was dedicated to elemental practice, with containers of earth, water, and air currents, plus a specially warded fire pit. "This is perfect," Harry breathed, already imagining the possibilities for developing his newly discovered abilities. Anna showed him the rest of the property: the gardens, the small orchard, the stream that ran along the southern boundary. Throughout the tour, Harry felt a growing sense of peace. This place, untouched by his complicated British history, offered exactly what he needed: space, security, and serenity to discover himself anew. That evening, after Anna had helped him settle in and departed for her parents' temporary home in Egypt, Harry stood on the balcony outside his bedroom, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and purple. The air was fragrant with lavender and rosemary, the only sounds those of nature: birds settling for the night, the distant bleating of sheep, the gentle rustle of wind through trees. He extended his magical senses, feeling the protective wards surrounding the property, the natural magic in the earth below, the elemental patterns in the air around him. Without the bindings, his magical perception had become extraordinarily sensitive, allowing him to experience the world on levels he never imagined possible. As darkness fell, Harry noticed something curious. A small thread of magic, so subtle he might have missed it before, seemed to pulse within his core. Unlike the golden flow of his natural magic, this thread was silver, delicate but remarkably resilient. Curious, he focused on it, trying to determine its nature. With a start, he realized what it was: the final binding, the one Nagnok hadn't been able to identify during the removal process. Unlike the others, this one hadn't been placed by Dumbledore, or the Unspeakables, or even Voldemort's Horcrux. It had a different signature entirely, one that felt familiar, comforting. Concentrating more deeply, Harry followed the silver thread to its source and suddenly understood. This binding hadn't been imposed externally but had formed naturally, created by his own magic as a child in response to trauma. It was a self-protective measure, formed in the aftermath of his parents' murders to shield his mind from the full psychological impact of that night. The binding didn't restrict his magic or alter his personality. It simply held certain memories at a distance, allowing him to function without being overwhelmed by the horror he had witnessed. His own magic had created a buffer, a protective barrier between his conscious mind and the most traumatic moments of his past. Harry could dissolve it now if he chose. With his new understanding of magical theory and his unbound power, removing this final restriction would be straightforward. But as he considered it, he realized he didn't want to, not yet. This wasn't an external control to be rejected but an internal adaptation to be respected. Some memories, perhaps, were best approached gradually. Some wounds needed time to heal before being fully exposed. His magic had known this as a child and had protected him in the only way it could. "I choose to keep you," he whispered to the silver thread. For now. It was, he realized, the first truly free choice he made about his magic, not rejecting something imposed by others but actively choosing to maintain something his own magic had created. There was power in that choice, a different kind of power than raw magical ability. The power of self-determination. Of agency. As stars appeared in the velvet sky above Provence, Harry Potter stood at the threshold of a new life. His magic unbound, his path uncharted, his future finally his own to shape. Behind him lay manipulation and control, prophecy and destiny, the weight of others' expectations and designs. Before him stretched possibility, the chance to discover his true magical potential, to build genuine connections untainted by compulsions or financial transactions, to define himself rather than being defined by his past or by others' visions for his future. It wouldn't be easy. Voldemort remained a threat. Britain's magical society would continue to have expectations and demands. The prophecy, whatever its true meaning, hadn't simply disappeared. Sooner or later, he would need to face these challenges. But he would face them on his terms, with his full magic at his disposal, and with a clear understanding of who he was and what he stood for. Not as Dumbledore's carefully crafted weapon, not as the wizarding world's symbolic savior, but as himself, Harry James Potter, finally free to become the wizard he was always meant to be. Under the stars of southern France, with the scent of lavender in the air, and the hum of unbound magic beneath his skin, Harry made a promise to himself. Whatever came next, whatever challenges arose, he would face them as his true self, no longer defined by bindings or manipulations or others' expectations. The bindings were gone. The truth was known. The reckoning had come. And now, at last, his real story could begin. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.